Chapter 25:13. Even Dong Wuxiang knew that he wouldn't be able to bear such terrifying and extreme destructive power alone. If he wanted to block Drunk Wuqing's final attack, he could only use his ultimate move, Merciless Blade. Attack against attack, kill against kill. Only by risking one's life could he have a chance of survival and victory. However, the moment the blade was unleashed, heaven and earth were merciless. Drunk Wuqing's move turned the world into a collapsing mass of murderous intent. Dong Wuxiang's blade, on the other hand, was extremely condensed into the purest point. The sword mountain came crashing down with unstoppable force. However, the saber light that Dong Wuxiang had turned into met the attack head-on without any hesitation. The speed of this moment could really be traced back to 1,000,000 years of time. The endless murderous intent that Drunk Wuqing had accumulated for more than 1,000,000 years stopped and solidified at this moment. The sword mountain still came crashing down. Dong Wuxiang, on the other hand, broke through the sword mountain at a speed that surpassed the limit. The dark saber let out a sound that shook the world. Dong Wuxiang's burly figure appeared behind Drunk Wuqing. 100 feet away. The sword mountain was still crumbling piece by piece. It was still in the midst of an explosion, still causing terrifying destructive power. However, this destructive power had no target at all. Without a target, no matter how powerful or shocking the attack was, it would be meaningless. The reason for this was because the person who created this sword mountain had already suffered a fatal injury. Drunk Wuqing's stalwart body suddenly froze in a flash of light. After a while, the light of the sword mountain finally dissipated. The two figures reappeared at the top of the imperial city. Drunk Wuqing stood still for a long time with his back facing Dong Wuxiang. Suddenly, he turned around slowly and faced Dong Wuxiang again. The onlookers, those below the high-level saint level, could not tell who had won this battle. They only saw a flash of light and everything was over. Who had won? Those who were lucky enough not to be injured. Everyone was asking themselves this question. Drunk Wuqing faced Dong Wuxiang and suddenly revealed a strange smile. He praised, "Good saber. What a sharp saber." Dong Wuxiang was silent. After a while, he said bitterly, "The sword is not bad too. It's really not bad. Not as good as the saber. Far from it." Zue Wuqing chuckled and waved his sleeves confidently. "This blade. What's it called?" Dong Wuxiang said solemnly, "Merciless Blade." Drunk Merciless suddenly burst into laughter. Swaying back and forth, he said, "Good name. Perhaps this is my destiny? My name is Zue Wuqing, and your saber is Merciless Saber. Merciless Saber / Merciless Drunk. It is indeed the will of the heavens." There was a complicated look in Dong Wuxiang's eyes as he said indifferently, "It's you who forced me too hard. I have no other choice. Although I don't want you to die, I don't want to die even more." Drunk Merciless laughed loudly. He said fiercely, "Well said, you won't kill me. I'll kill you." In a battle of life and death, the winner would live and the loser would die. The winner would be king. I too want to win. Killing you is also my goal. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it. Dong Wuxiang's eyes were sharp as he said softly, "Yes, you'll never be able to do it." When Drunk Merciless spoke on the verge of death, Dong Wuxiang couldn't help but soften. The experienced Drunk Merciless immediately reminded Dong Wuxiang with a fierce tone. Dong Wuxiang immediately came to his senses. At this moment, he couldn't reveal any flaws. Otherwise, Drunk Merciless would really have died in vain. He couldn't die in peace. Drunk Merciless laughed loudly. Drunk Merciless' voice sounded in Dong Wuxiang's ears. "Ha! Am I a dog?" Drunk Merciless was still thinking about this question in his last moments. However, in the face of such a man, who dared to say that he was someone else's dog, Dong Wuxiang immediately replied, "You're not a dog. Although you have flaws in the big picture, you're a real man." Flaws? Drunk Merciless' voice was filled with helplessness. "Dong Wuxiang, I hope you won't be controlled by him. Otherwise, you'll know that this flaw is something you can't refuse." "Thank you. I'm not a dog. I'm a man." The voice was suddenly cut off. Drunk Merciless looked up to the sky and roared. Suddenly he leaped up and floated into the sky. He stood in the air and recited, ruling the heavenly court for 1,000,000 years, shaking hands with 3,000 worlds. Today I die with no regrets because I've killed Merciless. As soon as he finished, he laughed loudly. Just as he started laughing, a ball of blood suddenly burst out from his chest. Then, without any warning, a big hole appeared in his chest. It was transparent from front to back. Just now, Dong Wushang and his saber had passed through this hole. This was also the key to victory in the fight just now. That slash had actually destroyed all of Drunk Merciless' life force. The reason why he could still stand and talk, and even look normal on the surface, was because of the last breath of vital energy of a peak saint. As Drunk Merciless laughed, the vital energy finally dissipated. Once the vital energy dissipated, the heavy injuries that he had forcefully suppressed naturally erupted. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Drunk Merciless, who was dressed in a bright yellow robe, stood in the air with his hands behind his back. Even with a huge hole in his chest, he still looked like a king. With a smile on his face, he said, "Dong Wusheng, the winner is the king. From now on, the ultimate heaven is yours." As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body suddenly turned into a ball of dust with a boom. He disappeared just like that. In the shadows, Sage Lord Yun Shangren's face appeared even more callous. He stretched out his hand and beckoned, as if he had intercepted something. Then he glared coldly at Dong Wushang. Then he turned around and disappeared without a trace. Outside the city, seeing Drunk Merciless' body turn into dust and disappear without a trace, the women all spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted without a sound. Only the woman in the center gritted her teeth and tried to stay conscious. She stared at the sky where Drunk Merciless disappeared without blinking. Her hands were clenched into fists. Her nails had already pierced deep into her flesh, and blood was dripping down. With a whoosh, the exploded flesh flew over from the distant sky. With a slap, it stuck to the woman's hand, and in an instant, it almost fused with the woman's blood. It was only the size of half a fingernail. It was just a tiny piece of flesh. However, this woman held it tightly in her hand as if she had found a treasure and pressed it against her chest. Her lips trembled uncontrollably as tears flowed out of her eyes. "Husband, I know. You were still worried about us, so you came to see us. You came to accompany us. It's great that we're a family. Finally, we're reunited, you're finally free. Happy for you. For more than 1,000,000 years of humiliation, you never had a single day. You've never been happy for a single day. You've always endured humiliation for the sake of our family, for the sake of our children. But we all know that as a husband, as a father, you're a great man. No one is greater than you. For 1,000,000 years, if you had decided to die, you would have died. He could have died a long time ago. He could have died countless times. Life is hard and death is easy. But you never chose to be free. You've always carried it, endured it, and supported it. Until now, until we've all been exchanged for freedom. Then, you finally left with peace of mind. Although I can't bear to part with you, I'm really happy for you. For 1,000,000 years. You've only laughed at the end today. That's the only time you've truly opened your heart and laughed happily. I've finally seen you again, from the bottom of my heart. Laugh once." The woman closed her eyes tightly as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Don't worry, after I've settled the children, I won't stay for a moment. I'll immediately leave with you. Although I don't know where you are, when you return to chaos, my soul will scatter. In this world, since you're no longer here, I don't want to stay for a moment longer. No one knows, only I know. Even though your name is Wu Qing in this world, there is no other man who understands love more than you, who is more affectionate, perhaps, in this entire world. Only I know what my husband, Zue Wuqing, meant when he recited that poem at the end. Today, I'll leave with no regrets. Because Wuqing killed Wuqing. Truly without regrets. His family was already safe. How could Wuqing killed Wuqing be referring to the Wuqing blade? If I, Zue Wuqing, didn't want to die, who could kill me? I'll die today because don't want to live anymore. This was the pride of a heavenly emperor. Towards Dong Wushang, who had fought to the death with her husband, the woman didn't have any hatred in her heart. Only because of Dong Wushang, Zui Wuqing was truly free. The last day, the last battle, was also Zui Wuqing's last true happiness. For the first time in 1,000,000 years, he was truly happy. Although the ending was death. We don't hate you, but we can't help you. Looking at the empty Dong Wushang, the woman said softly, we only wish you good luck. Don't be controlled again. Otherwise, it'll cause another tragedy. She sighed sadly. She knew how difficult it was to not be controlled by that person in the extreme heaven. After a long time, the other women woke up one by one. They looked at each other in despair. They gritted their teeth and sobbed silently. Finally, they supported each other as they walked into the forest. They kept looking back as they walked. Those few bloated figures gradually disappeared. Occasionally, someone would also see these few women, but they couldn't help but turn their heads and spit in disdain. Where did these ugly ghosts come from? They're really too ugly. These girls turned a deaf ear to those comments and obscenities, and walked away without looking back. The one who was in the lead had one of her hands tightly clenched into a fist, and had been holding it tightly to her chest the entire time. Husband, let's go home. Let's go home together. There was only silence in Merciless City. This battle of the century had already ended for a while. But no one made a sound. Chapter 25:14. After a long time, everyone seemed to have come to a realization and erupted into thunderous cheers. Those were Dong Wushang's Heavenly Armament Pavilion subordinates who were cheering for Great Emperor Wushang's victory. Then there was endless noise. Those were the others who also seemed to have woken up from a dream and went with the flow. They might not be sincere, but their voices were loud. All kinds of unexpected and unbelievable events had turned Merciless City into a huge noisy market in an instant. Everyone was talking, but no one knew, and no one could hear what they were talking about. They only felt their hearts filled with shock. No one would have thought that the battle between these two peak experts, the ultimate battle between kings, would really end with one side defeated. The merciless heavenly emperor who had dominated the extreme sky for millions of years was killed by the young great emperor Wushang on the spot. This result was really out of everyone's expectations. As a result, the entire imperial city fell into an unprecedented state of chaos. Because it was only now that those spectators finally realized what kind of injuries they had suffered. Miserable screams rang out one after another, as if they wished they were dead. Dong Wushang had been standing at the peak of the imperial city with his saber in his hand. His figure was motionless, like a towering mountain. His broad shoulders propped up the entire sky of the extreme heaven. His gaze slowly turned. Whichever direction it turned to, that direction would instantly fall into silence. At this moment, that extremely condensed aura finally descended upon the world, dominating the world. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the GMO, and Li Xiongtu jumped up anxiously and came to Dong Wushang's side. Dong Wushang saw that his beloved wife had arrived. Finally, he let out a long breath and took a step forward. With the help of Immortal's cultivation, he flew thousands of feet in the air and disappeared outside the city. Obviously, Dong Wushang, who had been famous for millions of years, had to pay a price for defeating the extreme Sky Lord. Perhaps the price was extremely high. It was just that everyone looked at him with extreme respect at this moment. They watched Great Emperor Wushang leave and didn't dare to make any rash moves. Everyone knew that when Great Emperor Wushang appeared once more, he would be the first to show his face. He was already the ruler of the extreme sky, a heaven lord. Just as they returned to the tent, Immortal felt Dong Wushang's body trembling violently. Then his body became sticky. Countless wounds suddenly appeared on Dong Wushang's body. At the same time, a large amount of blood spurted out. As far as the eye could see, there were over 100 sword wounds. Although it was said that he was covered in cuts and bruises, it was the rarest of all. Dong Wushang held Immortal's hand. I'll rest for a while. You and GMO look after me. No one is allowed to get close to me. When I wake up, I'll explain to you. Dong Wushang closed his eyes and fainted before he could finish speaking. In this battle, Dong Wushang had single-handedly killed Heavenly Emperor Merciless. Especially when he had to face Zui Wuqing's all-out killing move at the end. In fact, he was already at the end of his rope. This battle had been won by a close shave. It could even be said that if not for Zui Wuqing's desire to die, it would have been hard to say who would have won this battle. Even though Dong Wushang had won by a narrow margin, it was already a miracle that Fault could barely hold on until now. Now that he was safe and finally at a place where he didn't need to disguise himself, the vital energy that he had forcefully gathered dissipated instantly. He couldn't hold on any longer and immediately fell into a coma. But before he fell into a coma, he was still on guard against what Zui Wuqing had said. If the saint came to find trouble at this time, it would be terrible, so he specially instructed GMO and Emole not to let anyone get close to him. With his wife and brother protecting him, Dong Wushang could truly rest assured and focus on healing his injuries. Emole gasped and hurriedly took out a heavy pill and stuffed it into Dong Wushang's wound. Only after checking his pulse did she feel relieved. Although his pulse was weak, it was still very solid. It wasn't an injury caused by death. As long as he recuperated for a while, he would recover. It was just that he needed some time to recover from the loss of vital energy. Carefully laying Dong Wushang's entire body flat, Emole quietly sat beside him and slowly started to treat his wounds. The heavy pill had already started to take effect slowly, but this time, the effect of the heavy pill was especially slow. The injury caused by the Heavenly Emperor of Merciless, one sword that turned 10,000 miles into heavens, naturally included the Heavenly Emperor's royal aura and the domain damage of a peak saint. Although the heavy pill could heal all injuries, its effect on such special injuries was greatly reduced. Actually, the most targeted treatment method was still to use the injured person's own cultivation to refine the opponent's power. This was the way to treat the root of the problem. Although the heavy pill could heal all injuries, it wasn't very effective when used here. But in this world, there was no medicine more effective than the heavy pill. GMO, you go out first. I'll take off his clothes and treat his injuries, Emole said in a low voice. GMO shook his head resolutely. I definitely won't go out now. Sister-in-law, you can handle it. I'll wait at the door. He laughed bitterly and said, It's not that I don't know how to avoid arousing suspicion, but it's because the last sentence Dong Wushang said before he fell into a coma was really meaningful. He asked the two of us to guard him and not let anyone near him. Before this, when did Dong Wushang care about this? And it was in his own camp. But this time he said it so seriously. There must be another reason. I'm afraid this reason is very serious. So, I must wait here. Even if you hit me, I won't go out. GMO was as resolute as a rock. All right then. Emole didn't argue with him anymore. Dong Wushang's injuries really couldn't be delayed. The sooner he was treated, the faster and better the effects would be. She immediately got busy. GMO's back was facing Dong Wushang and Emole. He stared at the door with a vigilant gaze. His divine senses had already spread out in all directions, paying attention to the movements in the surroundings. He didn't dare to miss any movement. At this moment, GMO was like an injured wolf king in the wasteland. He looked at the surroundings with infinite vigilance. As long as there was any movement, he would immediately go all out. GMO had experienced so many wars in his life. But this was the first time he was so vigilant. Because GMO knew. The words that Dong Wushang had said were definitely hiding a huge crisis. Even people like Dong Wushang were afraid. Even having a wife with the cultivation of a peak Saint Emole by his side wasn't enough. And he had to leave him behind too. What kind of thing would that be? GMO couldn't help but shudder at the thought of it. And now, the other brothers weren't here. He was the only one here. So, even if the sky really collapsed, he had to hold it up. Not to mention a person, even a small insect, could forget about getting close to the present Dong Wushang. Other than Emole, no matter who it was, if they wanted to walk in front of Dong Wushang, you'll have to step over my dead body to do so. GMO's gaze was resolute. He had already made such a vow in his heart. His body was like a bow with an arrow on the string, a bow that had been fully drawn. In his life, he had never been so nervous. Under Ji Mo's infinite vigilance, time passed bit by bit. Mo lay, had already treated all of Dong Wushang's wounds. He only felt weak all over. The wounds on Dong Wushang's body were all caused by the sword aura. Every one of them was a shallow cut on the skin. But when the blood was brushed away, one would discover that it was a deep cut. Fresh blood surged, extremely terrifying. There were a total of more than 130 such wounds. Although Immortal was the king of assassins and had seen too many of such wounds, this time, it was on the body of her most beloved husband. How could she easily control her emotions? She cried as she cleaned up. In the past, as long as he took the heavy pill, even if the wounds didn't recover in time, there would definitely be miraculous effects. But this time, the recovery speed of the wounds was actually unprecedentedly slow. But this time, with the power of the extreme celestial emperor's domain, the effects of the heavy pill were also greatly weakened. Fortunately, Dong Wushang's cultivation was high and Mo Lei's treatment was also timely. Everything was developing in a good direction. After a period of time, Dong Wushang's breathing finally stabilized. Although it was still slightly weak, it was continuous and strong. Only then did Mo Lei feel as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. Just as she was about to turn around, she unexpectedly felt an unusually strong murderous aura coming from GMO, who was at the door behind her, without warning, as if he was going to fight to the death with some great enemy. Then, she saw GMO hurriedly turn around and blow out the oil lamp in the tent in one breath. In an instant, it was pitch black. Seeing this, Mo couldn't help but be shocked. She knew that something had happened again. Just now, she was wholeheartedly saving her husband and completely neglected the movements around her. She only heard GMO say hurriedly, "Sister-in-law, if the situation is critical, carry Wushang and leave alone. Don't care about anything else." Ever since the brothers reunited, GMO's personality was still the same. He was always joking around and never had a proper appearance. But now, he had a rare stern face and his expression was unusually serious. In fact, there was even a hint of fear in his voice. Because he knew that what Dong Wushang was most worried about was probably really happening. At this moment, Mo's body was completely tensed up. His hand was already silently gripping the long sword that he always carried with him. He was just about to speak when she felt an overwhelming and shocking aura coming towards her. An elegant and graceful voice said, "Where is Great Emperor Wushang?" Outside, there was a series of shouts and interrogations. Then there were a few ping-ping sounds, followed by a series of tragic screams. Almost in the blink of an eye, the entire camp was thrown into chaos. Then a majestic voice said, "Who are you? Stop right there." That was Li Xiongtu's voice. Then Li Xiongtu let out a muffled groan and shouted, "Be careful." Then there was a poof, and Li Xiongtu was sent flying by that person's palm. Mo's palms were already sweaty. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Chapter 25:15. Li Xiongtu had encountered many fortuitous encounters in the past 2 years, and his cultivation progress could be said to have advanced by leaps and bounds. Now, he was already at the level of a saint, and could be said to have reached the level of a first-rate expert in the world. In addition, Li Xiongtu was born with a kind of fearless aura of an expert. When competing with martial artists of the same level, he was almost always at a disadvantage. Even when facing a high-level saint, it was not that he did not have the strength to fight. But at this moment, in the hands of the enemy, he was actually unable to withstand one move and was sent flying. Even the person who came was just disdainful of killing and showed mercy. If he really wanted to kill, Li Xiongtu might have already died. Who was it? The night was dark. That elegant voice said helplessly, "I am here to discuss important matters with Heavenly Emperor Wushang. I have no ill intentions. Why are you stopping me?" Then, a series of whooshing sounds were heard, and then there were many angry curses, shouts, the sound of golden blades cutting through the air, and the sound of clothes fluttering. Obviously, the experts of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion had already come from all directions and joined the battle to intercept the person. Swish, swish, swish. In front of the tent, there were at least 100 people gathered here to protect their leader. They blocked the path of the person who came. Through the accumulation of this period of time, the Heavenly Armament Pavilion under Dong Wuxiang already had hundreds of saint-level experts. This kind of strength might be slightly weaker than the other heavenly emperors. However, they were already one of the stronger powers in the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. Dozens of saints were attacking the person with all their strength. More than 100 experts were guarding the tent. Such a lineup could definitely be called gorgeous. But in Ji-Mo's heart, he did not feel the slightest bit safe. The experts he had brought with him were already lying in ambush at this moment. But even so, he still felt that it was not safe enough. He did not know why, but Ji-Mo had a kind of can't stop it, not a match, danger, and other such strange feelings. This was a kind of intuition. This kind of intuition made him feel that even if the brothers and the boss Chuyang were all here now, they would not be able to stop this person. Originally, in Ji-Mo's heart, his brothers joined hands to fight the enemy side by side. They were absolutely invincible. But this time, even this absolutely invincible dream combination was not a match for the person who came. Could the person who came really be so strong? Get ready. Ji-Mo arched his body like a leopard that was ready to attack at any time. His voice was urgent and nervous. Fourth sister-in-law, this is a matter of life and death. You can't hesitate at all, you must listen to me. With fourth brother. Hurry up and leave. Go as far as you can. No matter what happens, don't look back. Emole Air took a deep breath and asked in a low voice, what about you? Ji-Mo's voice was calm, I have my own way to escape. Don't worry about me. Do not hesitate. Emole nodded and quickly wrapped Dong Wuxiang up. Ji-Mo was calculating in his heart. If Dong Wuxiang and Emole left, what were the chances of him surviving? He could hear the miserable cries of the people outside, and people kept falling back. The more Ji-Mo thought about it, the more he realized how terrifying this person was. Or, if I were to stop this person from chasing after Dong Wuxiang, there would be no chance of survival. Ji-Mo tightened his grip on his sword. Boom! With a loud bang, the person arrived in front of the tent and said indifferently, I have always been merciful and have never killed anyone. I just don't want to kill anyone. I said it. I just want to meet Great Emperor Wuxiang. I have no ill intentions. Why are you stopping me? Since you have no ill intentions, then come back after Great Emperor Wuxiang recovers. Li Xiongtu's fierce voice sounded. He rushed back again. Great Emperor Wuxiang has just finished his battle, and you come here in such a manner. It is obvious what your intentions are. That person laughed bitterly and helplessly. What a stubborn person. With a loud bang, Li Xiongtu was sent flying again. With a loud roar, the hundreds of experts in front of the tent attacked together. That person sighed. Since that is the case, I won't hold back. With a loud bang, many people groaned and wretched cries rang out one after another. Outside, a sound like a hurricane rang out. Woo woo woo, that was the figure of that person. It was spinning rapidly, turning into a human tornado. Only the people outside would know that the person's body had completely disappeared. What surrounded their bodies was a real wind that had form but no substance. It was all-pervasive. Puff, 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 puff. Dozens of experts were hit at the same time and fell in all directions. They had no way to resist at all. With a whoosh, the curtain of the tent was pulled open. A thin and slender figure whose face couldn't be seen stepped in. At this moment, Ji-Mo didn't say anything and suddenly attacked. A ball of sword light, in an extreme way like an explosion, instantly filled the entire space within the tent. The sword energy wreaked havoc, and the tent that was the first to be struck by it was instantly torn into pieces. At the same time, the experts outside had already rushed in, and the scene was extremely chaotic. In a pitch-black place, Emole carried Dong Wuxiang and used her unparalleled concealment technique. She silently floated out from the opening of the tent and blended into the dark night. That mysterious person's senses were really impressive. In such a chaotic scene, he was still able to detect Immortal's presence. Just as he was about to turn around, he felt a ball of sword light on his right and an extremely violent explosion coming towards him. There was actually another expert at the peak level of a saint hidden in this tent. Even if he wasn't as good as Dong Wuxiang, he was still an expert of the same level. And the moment he came into contact with him, he attacked with all his might. The mysterious person didn't care much about this sudden attack. However, he snorted in anger and said, "You're asking for death." As he waved his sleeves, there seemed to be some kind of weapon that clashed with Jianghu's sword. In an instant, sparks flashed. People rushed in from all directions, yelling and shouting. Once again, they besieged the mysterious man. The subordinates that Jianghu had set up in advance also attacked at this moment. And this mysterious person looked in that instant and saw that Dong Wuxiang was no longer in the tent. He couldn't help but be furious. With a wave of his sleeves, the people surrounding him immediately stumbled back. His body floated up and was about to rush out, chasing in the direction that he vaguely sensed just now. Jianghu gritted his teeth and pushed his cultivation to the limit. His body and sword became one as he fiercely pierced through the air. "If you want to chase after my fourth brother, I'll take your life." Even though the mysterious person's strength was astonishing, he was still a little afraid of Jianghu's all-out attack. He stopped in his tracks and waved his sleeves again. A jade color flashed again, and the mysterious weapon collided violently with Jianghu's sword again. Everyone who saw this scene was greatly shocked. They weren't shocked by Jianghu's attack, but by the weapon that the mysterious person used to fight against Jianghu. This mysterious man in white actually used only a thin piece of jade rui to fight. Such a fragile material actually didn't suffer any damage when it clashed with Jianghu's well-tempered sword. With just one clash, Jianghu immediately spat out blood and fell back. His sword flew out of his hand and turned into a stream of light, stabbing towards the mysterious person. He didn't even give this person a chance to catch his breath. Once he had time to react, Dong Wuxiang would be in danger. In a flash, the mysterious man in white had already caught the long sword in his hand. Jianghu, on the other hand, pounced on him like a mad tiger. His fists and feet intertwined. Every part of his body had turned into a sharp weapon. Head, shoulders, elbows, knees, buttocks, legs, back, waist, feet, hands. He was like a demonic god with 1,000 arms and legs, using an extremely shameless method, using every possible method to entangle the mysterious man in white. Although the difference in cultivation between the two of them was too great to be measured, he still fought to the death without retreating. His only goal was to prevent the mysterious person from escaping. The mysterious person in white was furious at Jianghu's actions. He didn't show any mercy and attacked repeatedly. Almost in an instant, Jianghu's body was hit repeatedly. Every time they collided, Jianghu felt his internal organs vibrating violently and shattering. Perhaps in the next moment, in the next attack, his internal organs would be completely shattered. Jianghu's face was distorted, and blood flowed from his orifices, but he still didn't retreat. "Fourth brother hasn't gone far yet. I can't retreat. Perhaps in the next moment, in the next attack, my internal organs will be completely shattered. But at this moment I still have to hold on. Every bit of time that I can hold on is a little bit safer for fourth brother." His eyes were already a little dazed from the repeated attacks, but that stubborn light still shone stubbornly. The man in white raised his leg and kicked Jianghu's chest. Blood spurted out from Jianghu's orifices, but his two hands held on tightly to the man in white's leg. The man in white finally let out a long sigh, and his leg shook. Jianghu's two arms broke into pieces with a pop-pop sound. He was powerless to do anything. Jianghu's entire body fell to the ground like an emptied sack, but his eyes were still wide open as he glared at the mysterious person. "You're his guard?" At this time, the man in white finally gave up on the idea of pursuing Dong Wuxiang. After this period of delay, wanting to find Dong Wuxiang again was undoubtedly a fool's dream. "Great Emperor Wuxiang saved my life." Jianghu's eyes rolled back, and blood gushed out from his mouth. At the last moment of his life, he still couldn't tell the truth. Because his identity was actually the same as Dong Wuxiang's. There wasn't much difference. He couldn't catch Dong Wuxiang, so he caught him, and the result was the same. He could also threaten his brothers. Previously he fought to the death for Dong Wuxiang, but now he was lying for all his brothers. Chapter 25:16. Saving Your Life. The mysterious man in white looked at GMO, who was barely breathing. Blood was foaming at his mouth and his pupils were in a mess. He couldn't help but sigh in pity. A peak saint expert with such a temperament can't be used by me. Moreover, he's dying. There's no saving him. The man in white stood quietly for a while. Suddenly, he floated up and said coldly, "He saved your life. Today, you're dying for him. You're returning the favor." The next moment, he was in midair. With a wave of his sleeve, sword light flashed. A sword stabbed into the ground beside GMO. That was GMO's sword. "You're a good man. Let your sword be buried with you." As soon as he finished speaking, dozens of bangs were heard. The mysterious man in white broke through the obstruction of dozens of experts and disappeared without a trace. He could tell at a glance that GMO's injury was beyond saving. He didn't waste any more time and attacked again. GMO's pupils slowly became unfocused. It seemed that he was about to leave. However, his fingers were making some difficult movements. There was a heavy pill between his fingers. He moved with great difficulty, trying to stuff the heavy pill into his mouth. As long as the heavy pill entered his mouth, there was hope. However, his injury was too serious. It was so serious that he couldn't move. His arm was completely shattered. He didn't have the ability to put the heavy pill into his mouth. His pupils continued to dilate. GMO's mouth finally showed a bitter smile. Was he really going to die? At this moment, a man was coughing up blood and crawling over quickly. One of his legs was shattered. One of his arms was also shattered. He only relied on his other hand and leg to crawl to GMO's side. It was Li Xiongtu. Looking at GMO's dilated pupils and the heavy pill in his hand, Li Xiongtu swallowed his saliva. However, he didn't hesitate. He took the heavy pill from GMO's finger and stuffed it into GMO's mouth. GMO's injury was so serious that it couldn't get any worse. His life was on the line. Even if he took the heavy pill, he might not survive. Because the previous series of attacks were heavy blows from the number one in the world. Previously, when Dong Wuxiang and Zhe Wuqing had fought to the death, their injuries were still manageable. However, because Zhe Wuqing's strength had already risen to the level of domain, the effects of the heavy pill were greatly reduced. Right now, GMO's condition was several times more serious than Dong Wuxiang's. The effect of the heavy pill was really not optimistic. Although Li Xiongtu's injuries were quite serious, he could still move and even circulate his martial arts. If he were to consume this heavy pill himself, he would be able to recover very quickly. Even his broken limbs could be regrown with the help of the heavy pill. However, Li Xiongtu still chose to stuff that heavy pill into GMO's mouth. "It's not mine. I don't want it. If others don't give it to me, I don't want it." Even if GMO ate the heavy pill, he still died in the end. The heavy pill was wasted, and it was still someone else's. A real man should do what he wants. There were things that should be done, and things that must be done. There were some things that he couldn't do. Li Xiongtu thought to himself. Finally, some of the experts who had collapsed on the ground slowly moved and even began to crawl up. Li Xiongtu said with difficulty, "Call someone to treat my injuries." Before he could finish, he fell to the ground with a plop and fell into a deep coma. Li Xiongtu's injuries were certainly lighter than GMO's. However, the severity of his injuries was equally shocking. He had suffered internal injuries in addition to crippled limbs. In fact, his injuries were even more severe than the injuries that Dong Wuxiang had suffered earlier. He had struggled to give GMO a heavy pill. Then he had shouted out loud. But he hadn't been able to hold on any longer and had fallen into a coma. At this moment, GMO's entire body was like a tattered gunny sack. Blood seeped out everywhere. He lay quietly on the ground. Although he was lucky enough to take that heavy pill, it was still unknown whether he was dead or alive. Everyone forced themselves to support their almost crippled bodies and crawl up. When they saw GMO's current condition, hot tears gushed out of their eyes. Everyone had seen how GMO had fought in that lightning-fast battle just now. There were only 8 words that could be used to describe GMO: fearless of death, fighting with his life on the line. That was it. Facing an enemy that was so strong that he couldn't resist, GMO didn't hesitate at all. He used all kinds of methods to restrain, entangle, and obstruct the enemy. He directly used his own life as a weapon to stop the enemy's advance. All for the sake of delaying the enemy for a split second, to create a chance for his brother to escape. Right now, he was lying there without any strength left, motionless. There were no signs of life on his body. A guard with tears in his eyes went over and carried GMO's body to the side. He wanted to wait for Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang to come back and bury him. But when he touched GMO's body, he was suddenly stunned. Then he became overjoyed and shouted crazily, "He's still alive! He's still alive!" Everyone was in an uproar because of this sentence. Not dead? It's good that he's not dead. The heavens bless the kind. It's good that he's not dead. Everyone was wild with joy when they saw this. Many men who prided themselves as tough men started to cry. A few people with lighter injuries carefully lifted GMO up and placed him on a new bed. A few saints with the highest strength forced their injured bodies to sit around GMO. They didn't care about their lives and transferred their cultivation into GMO's body. Everyone felt a lingering fear when they thought of the battle just now. They had never met an expert more powerful than the mysterious person today. Fortunately, that person didn't intend to kill them directly. So although everyone was heavily injured, no one really lost their lives. The one with the heaviest injuries was GMO, because he blocked the most ruthlessly. So, he was the one with the heaviest injuries. If not for a heaven-defying medicine like the heavy pill, GMO would have really turned into a ghost. In fact, even that mysterious and powerful enemy thought that GMO was on the verge of death and couldn't be saved. That was why he turned around and left. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but feel puzzled. With the mysterious person's cultivation, how could he make a wrong judgment? Such an expert who had surpassed the peak of the saint stage already said that he couldn't be saved. But GMO was actually still alive. This was simply an impossible miracle. Besides, everyone still had a question in their hearts, as well as a strong lingering fear. Who exactly was this mysterious person in white? He was actually so powerful. The people here were all veterans of the Heaven Imperial Court. Many of them had participated in the battle against Yuan Tianjia. But they had never thought that there was actually someone who could be so powerful in this world. As many as hundreds of saints surrounded and attacked. In the end, everyone was injured, but the mysterious person wasn't injured at all. GMO, who had reached the peak of the saint stage, tried his best to stop the mysterious person. Almost instantly, he was crippled and on the verge of death. And from the beginning to the end, the mysterious person didn't even have a drop of blood on him. In such a huge army of experts, he came and went as he pleased. Even Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang and Heavenly Emperor Wuqing, who shocked the world yesterday. They definitely didn't have such cultivation. What a powerful enemy this was. Was there really someone who could be an enemy of this person? Go back. When Dong Wuxiang woke up, he realized that he was in a foreign place and could only see Emole. After learning from Emole that GMO had stopped them and how powerful the enemy was, the first thing Dong Wuxiang said was to go back. Dong Wuxiang's body still couldn't move. His entire body seemed to be empty and he couldn't use any cultivation at all. But at this moment, his eyes were resolute. Extremely resolute and unquestionable. Emole looked at him in a daze. Go back immediately. Immediately. Dong Wuxiang's gaze gradually turned cold as he looked at his wife. He spoke in an almost commanding tone. If my brother GMO dies, Dong Wuxiang said lightly, then the two of us don't need to live anymore. In Emole's eyes at this moment, Dong Wuxiang actually looked at her with a somewhat unfamiliar gaze. He took a few deep breaths and suddenly roared as if he had exploded. How can you run away at the last minute? How can you let our brother face danger alone? Emily lowered her head in shame. Go back immediately. Dong Wushang said unquestionably, even if that place becomes a place of no return, I have to go back and see what's going on. But your body, even if you go. Emily said worriedly. Dong Wushang turned his head to the side. My buddy. You only have eyes for my body, but my brothers are facing death for me. Dong Wushang's voice sounded very cold and unfamiliar. Dong's heart suddenly felt like it was pierced deeply. I admit that my choice was a little selfish, but I'm a woman and you're my husband. At that time, I really couldn't care about others. Although I know that I shouldn't have done that, if I had to choose again, I would still do that. Dong Wushang closed his eyes and didn't say anything. His face was ashen and his breathing became increasingly uneven. Emily was stunned for a while. Suddenly, she carried Dong Wushang and ran back like a madwoman. Fine, since you insist, then I'll go back with you. If we die, then let's die together. If you can die for your brothers, then why can't I accompany you to the spring? The moment Emily lowered her head, a teardrop fell on Dong Wushang's face. Dong Wushang felt the warmth of his wife's tears and sighed inexplicably in his heart. However, he had no intention of compromising at all. If it were in the past, at this moment, he would have already started to be careful and apologetic. However, at this moment, Dong Wushang was burning with anxiety and his heart was as cold as iron. However, he also remembered that his blood was boiling and burning and his heart was beating wildly. I'm sorry. If it were anything else, I could give in to you no matter how much I have to suffer. However, on this matter, I definitely won't give in at all. This matter concerns the life and death of my brother. I definitely won't give in. Chapter 25:17. It was like a black ray of light as she sped back the way she came. Along the way, the husband and wife didn't speak. They just listened to the sound of the wind. When they saw the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's camp, both of them discovered the chaotic situation there. It was shocked and sped up again. When the Heavenly Armament Pavilion soldiers saw Emperor Wu Shang return, they all cheered. However, they were stopped by Emole. Given the current situation, they couldn't let more people know that Dong Wushang was back. Strict orders were given to seal off all news. After a while, they finally saw the military tent. It was a newly built military tent. Go in. Dong Wushang was very anxious. Opening the tent door, walked into the tent that was almost windy on all sides. As far as the eye could see, there were injured soldiers all over the ground. And behind this tent, there were even more heavily injured experts. There were no less than a few hundred people. All the experts that Dong Wushang belonged to the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, at least half of them had lost their ability to fight in this short battle. This extremely tragic situation made Dong Wushang and Emole's hearts burn with anger and heartache. Where's GMO? Seeing that the others weren't in danger, Dong Wushang finally asked the thing that he was most concerned about and wanted to know the most. When he asked this question, he only felt his heart twitching. He waited anxiously. Even his throat was dry. Please don't have any bad news. Please don't. Inside. Li Xiongtu gritted his teeth and treated the injury on his leg. Using his own hands, he pulled the broken bones back to their original positions one by one and connected them together. Then he used medicine. With such pain, the sweat on Li Xiongtu's forehead flowed down, but he didn't make a single sound. Dong Wushang urged Emole to carry him to Jimo's bed. Looking at this pile of rotten flesh, Dong Wushang only felt dizzy. Jimo is not dead. He's still breathing. Li Xiongtu said sadly, it's just that his injuries are really too serious. It's already beyond our ability. Dong Wushang controlled himself and reached out, placing his fingers on Jimo's wrist. That slight warmth. Her pulse was slow and sluggish, which made Dong Wushang feel sad, happy, and even more worried. He was happy that his brother was still alive. Sadly, his injuries were too severe. What he was worried about was such a serious injury. Could he still recover? Where are the heavy pills? GMO also has heavy pills on him. Dong Wushang asked. GMO has already taken a heavy pill. Li Xiong said, fortunately he has a heavy pill with him. I managed to preserve my last bit of primordial qi. Otherwise I would have died for sure. Dong Wushang closed his eyes. It's good that you're not dead. Thank goodness. Then he let Mo place him beside GMO's bed. Staring blankly at the unconscious GMO, a bitter smile appeared on Dong Wushang's face. Brother, Mo didn't hesitate and took out the few remaining heavy pills. He gave one to Li Xiong and the others who were more seriously injured. As for the last 2 pills, he ignored Dong Wushang's objections. He gave Dong Wushang and GMO another pill each. He forced it into their mouths. It was a scene of devastation and full of injured soldiers. The Heavenly Armament Pavilion, which was once the most powerful elite, was now only left with Mo, a peak expert, to support the situation. Just because of a mysterious person, the situation was so bad. Mo could not be bothered to argue with Dong Wushang anymore. She immediately got busy and sent out one order after another. Gather the injured soldiers and treat them with all your might. Seal the news and prevent it from spreading. All camps stay alert and set up the life and death chain formation. Also, spread the news immediately. It's extremely urgent and ask for help from the Tianji Intelligence Headquarters. At this critical moment, we must remain calm and cautious. Then Emma returned to her own tent and immediately disguised herself as a dark and thin guard. She came to the tent where Dong Wushang and GMO were recuperating. She also had to change her appearance a little. If that powerful enemy knew that she had returned, he would definitely guess that Dong Wushang had also returned. The habit of the two of them being inseparable was no longer a secret. Looking at the groggy and exhausted Dong Wushang, Mo finally felt relieved after going through this life and death situation. She really wanted to kick him. This stinky pig, he actually dared to yell at me just now. Thinking about it, Mo felt wronged. I was thinking for you and he actually yelled at me. Yes, I'd better wait for him to recover before I settle the score with him properly. Stinky pig. Do you only have your brothers in your eyes and not your wife? Thinking about it makes me grit my teeth, angry and wronged. Wasn't it all for you guys? Wasn't it all for what you asked me to do before you fainted? Why did you forget everything when your brothers were in danger? You actually spoke so coldly to me. I definitely won't let him off so easily. But when he yelled at me without any pity at that time, that kind of anxious calmness was really very manly. Sigh, back then, wasn't it because of his loyalty that I liked him? Held her chin with both hands and fell into a reverie for a moment. She wondered, when would the reinforcements, which were his brothers, arrive? Heavenly Armament Pavilion, the entire army was in a state of high alert, but every day felt like a year. The information had already been sent out long ago, but there was no response at all. On the surface, the army of Heavenly Armament Pavilion was still neat and tidy as they camped in the suburbs of Merciless City. From all directions, the army of the Extreme Heaven's origin was gathering here one after another. Although Zue Wuqing was already dead, it was still unknown whether the group of arrogant soldiers under him would submit to Dong Wushang, a heavenly emperor of a generation. How could he really not have a few trusted generals? If they knew that Dong Wushang was seriously injured and that the higher-ups of Heavenly Armament Pavilion had collectively become like this, the consequences were really unimaginable. Chu Yang had just returned to the Eastern Royal Heavens when he heard about the major incident in the Extreme Heavens. Heavenly Emperor Wuqing versus Heavenly Emperor Wushang. This news really gave Chu Yang a fright. He had only left for a year. Dong Wushang dared to openly challenge a member of the Heavenly Emperor-Empress. Wasn't he too daring? He urgently looked for people to understand the situation, but he actually couldn't find anyone. He couldn't find any specific information. It was equivalent to being in the dark. What was even more ridiculous was that the owner of the Eastern Royal Heavens, Eastern Royal Emperor, had actually gone somewhere. Chu Yang could be said to be burning with anxiety about the current situation. He didn't say anything else. He immediately set off for the Extreme Heavens. When he was halfway there, he heard that the outcome of the battle was already out. Heavenly Emperor Merciless of the extreme heavens was defeated and killed. According to the agreement, Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang, who won, didn't seem to be in a very good condition either. He was seriously injured and even disappeared without a trace after the battle. Currently, the army of Heavenly Armament Pavilion was still camped outside Merciless City, confronting the army that came from all directions. The situation was on the verge of breaking out. It wasn't optimistic at all. Chu Yang couldn't help but grit his teeth. He directly put the 3 girls into the tribulation space, then used the sword momentum of the tribulation sword to speed up his journey. Along the way, everyone who came into contact with the path of the tribulation sword basically only felt a thunderous sound, and then a lightning-like object flashed past above their heads and disappeared into the distant sky. There was nothing else. Chu Yang hurried on with his journey at top speed, almost as if he didn't care about his own life. He reached the extreme heavens on this day. It was only a little more than 2 hours away from his destination, Merciless City. Of course, this little more than 2 hours of journey was calculated with Chu Yang's current speed. If it was a normal journey, there was still more than 7,000 miles to go. In the eyes of ordinary people, it was almost equivalent to an unreachable distance. Chu Yang still didn't delay. He only drank a few mouthfuls of the spring of life, then set off on the tribulation sword again, flying toward Merciless City in a flash of lightning. How was Dong Wuxiang? How was the situation in Merciless City? In these few days, as he hurried along, he tried to contact Mo Tianji, but there was also no news. The only thing he knew was that Luo Kaidi and Rui Badong were also desperately rushing to the extreme heavens to help. As for GMO, he had already rushed to the extreme heavens to fight side by side with Dong Wuxiang. With GMO, Mo Lei, and the many experts of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion under Dong Wuxiang as reinforcements, and with millions of soldiers as his backing, even if Dong Wuxiang was seriously injured during the battle, he wouldn't suddenly disappear after the battle, right? Deliberately creating news of his disappearance at this time was definitely not a good move. Then, what exactly happened on Dong Wuxiang's side? Outside Merciless City. In all directions, the 3 armies were dressed in mourning. The frontier soldiers under Zui Wuqing's command rushed here from all directions, refusing to accept the fact that the extreme heavens had a new heavenly emperor, and even more unwilling to accept that the new heavenly emperor was the one who killed their leader. The merciless Iron Army will always be loyal to the merciless heavenly emperor. Life and death are the same. The merciless heavenly emperor's life will follow his majesty as he gallops across the heavens and vanquishes the enemy. The merciless heavenly emperor's death will avenge his majesty, and we will not rest until one of us is dead. The millions of soldiers were divided into 8 directions, each wearing white helmets, white armor, white robes, and white horses. They were dressed in mourning clothes. Even the flags of the army were all white. The flags were clear, and they were determined to avenge the merciless heavenly emperor. Under the command of the millions of soldiers, they knelt down and kowtowed 3 times to the imperial city. They paid their last and most noble respects to His Majesty, the heavenly emperor whom they were loyal to. In 2 days, all the robes and flags were dyed white, and the ultimate goal was for these last 3 kowtows. The only thing that was different was a blood-red flag. Surrounded by a white flag with a radius of 1,000 feet, the flag slowly rose and was pulled open. On it, there were 8 blood-red words condensed from the soldier's own blood. If I don't avenge this, I won't have any face in this life. Chapter 25:18. Boom. As this flag was slowly raised, the entire merciless army was in an uproar. Revenge. Revenge for His Majesty. 8 armies were marching towards the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, which was located in the south of the city. The first army was already fighting with the enemy. Dong Wuxiang, come out and fight. Dong Wuxiang, come out if you have the guts. Previously, you were so arrogant and aggressive. How did you become a coward now? It was a mess. The Heavenly Armament Pavilion's camp was strict. One look and you could tell that it was an army that had been through hundreds of battles. The camp set up by such an army was bound to be connected from head to tail. Once they rashly barged in, it would be a dead end. Perhaps, the entire army would be buried inside. It would not be strange. Being greedy and rash was originally a military taboo. Although the merciless army was anxious for revenge, it was not to the point of being muddle-headed. His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor gave you a chance to have a fair fight that day. Don't you dare to have a fair fight with us on the battlefield? As time went by, the scene became more and more chaotic. The battle could break out at any time. The merciless army sent out team after team of experts to challenge them one by one. However, the Heavenly Armament Pavilion did not move from beginning to end. And all those who dared to barge into the army were killed mercilessly. The other party is not willing to fight head-on. It seems that we can only force our way into the camp. A few senior generals of the merciless army gathered together to discuss. Everyone's eyes were bloodshot. But it's too risky to do so. It's a military taboo. Another person objected. The other party has as many as 1 million soldiers and horses left behind. Looking from a high place, the rules are strict and all-encompassing. The other party has obviously set up an extremely strong defensive formation. Moreover, it's the kind of military formation that will die together with the enemy. If we force our way in, the casualties will be great, and there won't be much chance of victory. Since everyone is here, no one will be afraid of death. However, the army that is still loyal to His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor is only left with us. If we all die, then His Majesty the Merciless Heavenly Emperor will be completely wiped out. But the other party insists on not fighting. What should we do? Are we just going to wait like this? Another person said impatiently. Then let's just wait. The enemy's only weakness right now is their supplies. The general from before smiled faintly. They've traveled a long distance to come here. No matter how well prepared the military supplies are, it's still not as convenient as us locals. If we continue like this, we'll definitely exhaust them to death. As long as we don't let them break out of the encirclement and return to the main camp, we will definitely win. Rather than forcefully attacking the enemy's battle formation, why don't we wait for them to fall into chaos first? However, Emperor Wuxiang's cultivation is extremely high. He can even defeat His Majesty Heavenly Emperor Merciless in a head-on clash. How can we possibly stop such an expert from breaking out of the encirclement? Another person said, Do you really think that Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang can defeat Heavenly Emperor Wuqing without suffering any losses? The general snorted coldly. I'm guessing that they're not fighting because Great Emperor Wuxiang is also heavily injured. In fact, he might even be dying. Wasn't there a rumor that Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang had gone missing after the Great Battle? It's very likely that this isn't a rumor. This sentence made everyone's eyes light up. A few generals lowered their heads. That night, countless assassins held the belief that they would definitely die. They infiltrated the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's main camp. They wanted to assassinate the heavily injured Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang. However, without exception, they were discovered before they could even find Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang's tent. Then they were all killed. A slender black figure was like a ghost in the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's main camp. It was as if she was everywhere, everywhere. With just a wave of her hand, no matter what level of expert they were, they all died unjustly just like that. There was no exception. Such a sneaky assassination technique, when used in the main camp, was really successful. However, Immortal was already burning with anxiety. She knew that the other party's patience was almost exhausted. It wouldn't take long. When the sky brightened and the other party discovered that all their assassins were dead, there was a high chance that the other party wouldn't be able to resist taking the risk and launching a strong attack. These people were originally a team that was close to madness and only came for revenge. Their patience right now was just a habit of being cautious as soldiers. Perhaps they only needed a small spark to completely ignite them. Meanwhile, the top experts on her side were all lying on the ground. If the other party really hardened their hearts and attacked from all directions, what should she do? No matter how strong she was, she couldn't possibly defend against the attacks of hundreds of thousands or millions of people. The night grew darker and darker. Immortal air was like an ant on a hot pan, pacing back and forth, unable to rest for even a moment. At this moment, there was suddenly a commotion at the entrance of the main camp. Immortal air tensed up and saw that the guards were already rushing over. "Your Highness, there's a group of people at the entrance. The leader calls himself Immortal and wants to see His Majesty." Immortal air suddenly felt weak all over and tears almost flowed out. The reinforcements she had been waiting for finally arrived. She couldn't help but exclaim in joy, "Quick, quick, invite them in." Then she said, "No need. I'll go and welcome them personally." As she said that, she rushed out like a gust of wind. At this moment, if there was someone Immortal air wanted to see the most, it wasn't the Calamity Sword Master Chu Yang but the resourceful Immortal. Now, Immortal, who had been missing for a long time, had finally arrived. Immortal air instantly felt that a huge rock in her heart had been lifted. Only now did she realize that it was really good to have these brothers. At the entrance, there were about a few hundred people standing quietly. The leader was wearing a moon-white robe and waving a folding fan in his hand. He had a handsome face and a carefree expression. He was tall and handsome. He was waiting with a smile on his face. It was Immortal. "You're finally here." Immortal air welcomed them excitedly. "How can I not come when I have something to do?" Immortal smiled and said, "I'm not the only one who's here. Many others are here too. Now, Luo Kadi and Rui Badong are also on their way. They'll probably be here by dawn at the latest. Other than Gu Duxing and Ao Shiyun, who are in the same situation as you and can't leave, even Xie Danqiong has left behind the matters at Mo Yuntian's side and is rushing here day and night." Thank you, thank you." Immortal air was so excited that she couldn't speak properly. "It's really good to have you guys." A voice laughed and said, "Sister Wushang, why are you so polite? We're family. Don't be so formal." Immortal air wiped her tears of excitement and looked towards the direction of the voice. She saw a girl in white winking mischievously at her. Who else could it be other than Chu Lu? This surprise was no small matter. Immortal air rushed forward and hugged Chu Lu tightly. She was so happy. At such a difficult time, not only did her brothers come, but she even had a close friend who could talk to her. This was really meticulous. Immortal raised his eyebrows and looked at Immortal air strangely. He said, "Let's go in and talk." Immortal air said happily, "I'm so happy that I even forgot the most basic manners. Everyone, please come in." She hurriedly led the group into the camp. At this moment, she felt relaxed all over. Immortal couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The all-powerful young black demon back then was now a peak saint. Ming Ming was already used to seeing joys and sorrows, used to seeing life and death. But now, because of Dong Wushang, she became so helpless. It seemed that love could really change a person. Regardless of whether it was a man or a woman, it was the same. He wanted to say something to lighten the mood, but no matter how hard he racked his brains, he couldn't think of a suitable joke. He thought, if only GMO and Luo Kudi were here. After entering the tent, he naturally checked on Dong Wushang and GMO's injuries first. After a round of inspection, Immortal frowned. Dong Wushang's injuries were slightly better, and he could already sit up. When he saw Immortal, he was overjoyed. "Don't worry about me, take a look at GMO first." "What should we do? He's still unconscious now." Immortal didn't hide his worried expression. He said, "GMO's injuries are too serious this time. I can't do anything. Now, the only person who can make him lively again is Boss." "Where is Boss?" Dong Wushang was shocked. Immortal smiled bitterly. "The worst thing is, he's probably not in the Heaven Imperial Court now." Dong Wushang exclaimed in shock. He was stunned. "I don't know where he went. Maybe he went to the Heaven Imperial Court? I don't know when he'll come back. He's been gone for more than a year. The Heaven Imperial Court is the only place where my Tianji Intelligence Department can't reach." Immortal sighed. He didn't expect that there would be no news of Chu Yang at all. He actually stayed in the Heaven Imperial Court for such a long time. If Chu Yang still didn't come back, and Ji Mo's injuries couldn't be delayed, what should they do? Dong Wushang's face suddenly became very sad. Now, we can only think of a way to extend Ji Mo's life. Hopefully, we can delay until boss comes back. Mo Tianji shook his head helplessly. He stuffed a heavy pill into Dong Wushang's and Ji Mo's mouths. He said, "Wushang, tell me more about the situation. There must be some secrets during this period. Otherwise, the situation wouldn't have developed to this point." Dong Wushang took a deep breath and said, "This matter is rather complicated. However, I finally know one of the places that nurtures the myriad saints' true spirit." Mo Tianji raised his head. "How did you know? Is the source reliable? Where is the destination?" Chapter 25:19. Mo Tianji's peak saint-level divine sense instantly enveloped the entire tent. Mo Tianji was confident that whatever he said inside would not be leaked. Even if the spy was a super expert who was several levels higher than him, it would be impossible for him to spy on everything that was enveloped by his divine sense without alerting him. After hearing Dong Wushang's words, even with Mo Tianji's composure, he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Mo Tianji asked himself, even if I were Zue Wuqing and used my family to threaten him, would I be able to escape Zue Wuqing's tragic fate? Mo Tianji had no confidence at all. Mo Tianji had always been calm, but he was definitely not cold-blooded. The same familial chains were equally effective on him. Everyone else present gnashed their teeth in hatred. Who would have thought that the heavenly emperor who ruled over a part of the world actually had such a tragic past? And such a tragic experience actually haunted the heavenly emperor Wuqing for his entire life, unable to escape even when he died. Cloud Master. Mo Tianji muttered, "Cloud Master. This Cloud Master is really a peerless scum. A peerless scoundrel." Chu Lu, who was standing at the side, was so angry that her face was flushed red. She cursed repeatedly, which was something she rarely did. "If this bastard falls into my hands, I'll definitely poison him for 1,000,000 years. I'll make him suffer a fate worse than death for 1,000,000 years before letting him die. I have always killed all my enemies with a single slash. I will never drag things out and make others suffer." Dong Wushang also gritted his teeth and said, "But when I heard about this, I suddenly felt that if Guru Yun dies a quick and painless death one day, even I won't be able to forgive myself. I really want to cut him into pieces." Mo Tianji smiled coldly and said, "That's a given. If such a person can still die a good death, then the heavens are blind." Then, he said, "Is the 10,000 Saints' true spirit's base in the heavenly stem mountains forest of terror?" He frowned and said, "There are a total of 3 bases like this? The whereabouts of the other 2 are unknown?" He stood up and paced around, his mind quickly organizing all the information. He nodded slowly and said, "I see. The most important thing now is first. It was to resolve the crisis before them as quickly as possible. Let the ultimate heaven truly enter his hands. Second, even if they couldn't stabilize Ji Mo's injuries, they still had to prolong his life until boss arrived. The secretly mobilizing manpower, the heavenly stem mountain. No, not yet." Mo Tianji quickly vetoed the third proposal and said, "I still need to think about this. If they were to take down the heavenly stem mountain base at this time, it might alert the enemy and cause panic in the other 2 bases. What if they were to break up and wander about in the martial world? That way, it'll be even harder to deal with. But if we don't kill it as soon as possible, how will the other 2 find the relevant clues?" With Mo Tianji's intelligence, at this moment he couldn't make up his mind. He felt that no matter what he did, he was at a loss. Mo Tianji finally realized Chu Yang's advantage at this moment. "I'm not as good as Chu Yang when it comes to making prompt decisions." He couldn't help but sigh as he thought of this. It would be great if Big Brother Chu was here. He would only need to make the final decision. He wouldn't need to think twice. Even Mo Tianji couldn't make up his mind and didn't know what to do, let alone the others. Dong Wushang said blankly, "Anyway, we'll do it when you guys have made up your minds." Mo Tianji nodded. The most important problem now is, the saint obviously wants you to replace Zue Wuqing and become the new heavenly emperor of the extreme. As long as you really take that seat, the entire palace can seal you inside. When that happens, he will have endless means and opportunities to deal with you in the Empyrean terminus and turn you into a puppet like Zue Wuqing. With his strength and scheming mind, it won't be difficult for him to do that. Dong Wushang grinned and said, "Yes, my weakness is too obvious. As long as he holds Lei or hostage, I'll have to give in no matter what." "Bah, you make it sound better than singing. I really have." Emole was still angry. Halfway through her words, she pouted and turned her head to the side. "What's going on? Sister Lei, you really have something?" Chula's eyes were filled with the light of gossip. "Ask him." Emole pointed at Dong Wushang angrily. "This heartless person. What is it? Could it be that Sister Lei is pregnant?" Chula's eyes were shining. No one knew how she made the connection, but she actually thought of that. Hearing this, Emole's face turned red. She grabbed Chula and tickled her. Chula begged for mercy. Dong Wushang saw that Emo Tianji's eyes were filled with gossip, and his face turned red. He laughed awkwardly and told them about what happened earlier. After Emo Tianji heard the whole story, he immediately took on the role of third elder brother. "Fourth elder brother, I have to talk to you about this matter. Sister-in-law is right in picking out the truth. You are in the wrong in this matter." Dong Wushang humbly listened and said, "Yes, yes." Emo Tianji said sanctimoniously, "Tell me, why are we looking for a wife? Isn't it to protect her? Love her? After marrying a wife, you have to treat her like a treasure. Everything else has to be secondary. Otherwise, why would she marry you? Am I right? Don't you think so?" The more Dong Wushang listened, the more he scratched his head. He raised his head suspiciously. Even someone like him who didn't like to use his brain could feel Emo Tianji's motive. It didn't seem like Emo Tianji was lecturing him, but more like he was expressing his thoughts to someone. "What's going on? Could it be this guy is using me as a tool again? A wife needs to be coaxed and protected. How can you do this? You're too much." Emo Tianji looked at Dong Wushang in exasperation. "Take me for example. I'm much, much better than you in this aspect. In my heart, there is a sacred and inviolable existence. Wushang, how can you do this?" The voice, cough cough, rolled her eyes and said, "Third brother, stop. I forgive him. I've forgiven him, okay? Please don't say any more. I can't take it anymore. I really can't take it anymore." She really couldn't take it anymore. "This is unbearable. This is unbearable. This Emo Tianji is too much. He actually used my man to flaunt himself. Is this considered as helping me vent my anger? He's trying to anger me, right? Is there anyone who upholds justice like this? He's obviously using his position for personal gain. He's taking advantage of the opportunity to belittle others and elevate himself. This is called a brother? This is really... Or still has a good temper. Where can I find a wife like her? You still don't know how to cherish her." Emo Tianji said happily, "Lei's temper is as good as Lur's. Wushang, why don't you cherish her like I do? You must learn from this in the future." Dong Wushang sat at the side with a black face. He thought, brothers are meant to be sold. This bastard. "Third brother Emo, that's enough. The situation is so bad. How do you plan to deal with it?" Emo quickly changed the topic. It would turn into Emo Tianji blowing his own trumpet and trying to curry favor if he continued to speak like this. "Well, we just need to stabilize ourselves." Emo Tianji sneered. "Wait until Wushang recovers slightly. As long as he shows up, everything will be settled. The so-called millions of rebels will be nothing but smoke. They'll disappear in an instant. Big brother, you think too highly of me. How can I have that ability? How can I have that prestige?" Dong Wushang was stunned. "These are all Zue Wuqing's troops. How can it be smoke? What did you say? Who was talking about you?" Emo Tianji looked at him strangely. "How can you have that ability?" Dong Wushang was stunned. You said that as long as I show up, Emotionji snorted and said, I was actually talking about Cloud Lord. As long as you show up, Cloud Lord will definitely help since he's looking forward to you taking over the position of Extreme Celestial Emperor. As long as he made a move, what problem would this scene before him be? It's just smoke. Dong Wushang was enlightened. He scratched his head and said, so that's what you mean. I understand now. Mo Tianji lectured him, fourth brother, you're going to be a celestial emperor in the future. Don't scratch your head so often. It's very undignified. How many times have you scratched your head since just now? It's too undignified. Dong Wushang was speechless. He wanted to cry. Fuck, I've never been mocked like this since I was young. You're actually mocking me like this. Just you wait, I'll take revenge on you when I get the chance. Emole Air also had an unfriendly look in her eyes. She seemed to have used the legendary Black Blade many times. This was probably the so-called courting death. If Cloud Lord really shows up, he must have other tricks up his sleeve to lure me into his trap. Dong Wushang said. Of course. Mo Tianji rolled his eyes and said, Cloud Lord forced Zhe Wuqing to death just to wait for you to take over. Then he'll control your wife and make you betray your brothers. Everyone will become his puppet. Dong Wushang said angrily, Emotenji, you dare to underestimate me? Why would I betray my brothers? You're not as good as me in this aspect. Mo Tianji sighed and said, I'm willing to do anything for Lu. I can do anything. Dong Wushang was furious. Chapter 25-20. That's right. Dong Wushang nodded. I despise him. My wife is right. There's nothing more right. Emole Air snorted and continued to ignore him. However, we have to take precautions against this. Mo Tianji didn't blush at all. He tapped his knee with his finger and said, how should we take precautions? Let's strike first. Emole Air said fiercely, let's gather our men and kill that Cloud Master. Won't that solve the problem once and for all? Everyone looked at Emole Air in shock. Then, they lowered their heads and didn't say anything. Mo Tianji coughed and looked around. He started to observe the injured soldiers in the tent. His expression was very meaningful. His meaning was obvious. He didn't even spend much effort and defeated all of you. Yet, you still want to strike first. I really don't know where your confidence comes from. Is this a complete extermination? This is a complete extermination plan. Emole Air was so angry that her face flushed red. She felt that Mo Tianji was more hateful than Dong Wushang. More hateful? 100 times, 1,000 times more hateful. This bastard. What kind of person is this? What kind of person is this? He's even more infuriating when he doesn't speak. Something doesn't seem right. Mo Tianji pondered and said, that mysterious expert is most likely Master Yun himself. Since he came here before, he must have been paying attention to the movements here. It's impossible that he didn't notice your return. The two of you must be his main targets. Whether or not the new puppet Heavenly Emperor is controlled all depends on the two of you. But what? Why hasn't he come yet? Mo Tianji frowned. What's going on? Did something happen that we don't know about? Dong Wushang was also a little puzzled. No matter how they took precautions and blocked the news, the atmosphere in the camp was completely different from whether he was here or not. Cloud Master was so anxious to find him and control him. Why didn't he come? Suddenly, a thunderous sound came from the sky. A figure brazenly landed in the camp, causing an uproar. Then, a deafening voice sounded. Wushang, are you okay? Everyone stood up at the same time. Boss is here. Everyone was inexplicably excited. Chu Yang's arrival at this critical juncture was like a meat pie falling from the sky. Everyone suddenly felt as if they had found their backbone. Even the meticulous Emotenji heaved a sigh of relief. This guy is finally here. Everyone went out to welcome him. He was surrounded by soldiers. Chu Yang and the three beauties stood side by side. Their faces were full of smiles as they looked in this direction. Boss. Big brother. Chu Yang didn't have time to exchange pleasantries. He had already learned about Ji Mo's condition from Mo Tianji. So, he went to Jimo's bedside and clicked his tongue repeatedly. This guy is really going all out this time? Not many bones in his body are intact. In the past, I didn't know that this little one was so hardworking. You can't judge a book by its cover. After 3 days, I'm looking at you in a new light. Dong Wushang said guiltily, it's all because of me that GMO suffered such serious injuries. If we were in a different position, you would probably be more seriously injured than him. Chu Yang interrupted him and said, what's there to feel guilty about? What GMO did was what he should have done. If he didn't do this and let you and Lei be taken away, not to mention how we brothers would look at him, he would look down on himself. While he spoke, his hands didn't stop moving. The heaven-splitting divine technique activated the medicinal power of the heavy pill hidden in Jimo's body. At the same time, a whole bottle of Spring of Life was poured into Jimo's mouth. His 2 hands were like butterflies as he reconnected Jimo's broken bones one by one. Then he forcefully activated the medicinal power to cover the broken bones, causing them to reconnect and recover quickly. Before Chu Yang came, without the protection of the Spring of Life, no one dared to act rashly. But now, seeing Chu Yang treating Jimo's injuries in such a bloody manner, everyone felt a chill run down their spines, and this was just watching. If one could feel how painful it was, then how much pain would GMO really be in? Luckily, GMO was still unconscious. Otherwise, this guy would definitely be crying for his parents. It was fine to risk one's life for a friend, but if it was too painful and he didn't cry for his parents, that was definitely out of the question. This was GMO's character. He reconnected the broken bones that could be treated one by one. Following the medicinal power, he reconnected the meridians. Only when everything was healed did Chu Yang heave a sigh of relief. Wiping the sweat off his forehead, he took out the heaven-nourishing jade and melted a small piece in Jimo's mouth. Actually, this piece of heaven-nourishing jade was the most important part of this treatment. The timing of its use was also very crucial. If it was used too early, Jimo's bones wouldn't be fully treated and abnormalities would appear in them. It would be very difficult to correct them afterward. If it was used too late, Jimo's cultivation wouldn't be able to recover to its peak state, and it would be even more difficult for him to improve in the future. The heaven-nourishing jade could only be used at the right time to treat his bone injuries and meridians. When the effects of the heaven-nourishing jade were fully activated and spread throughout his body, Chu Yang took out a small piece of the Big Wonder medicine. Pinching open Jimo's mouth, he melted the medicine drop by drop and dripped it down his throat. The Big Wonder medicine drop exuded a strange fragrance. When it dripped into Jimo's mouth, it instantly turned into 7 colors and then disappeared in a flash. It was only the 3rd drop, but the unconscious GMO actually regained consciousness. In a daze, he said, "Damn it, why is it so itchy? So itchy. Who, quickly scratch me. So itchy. It's too damn unbearable." Seeing this, everyone cheered thunderously. They also understood that Chu Yang's actions had finally pulled Jimo's life back from the gates of hell. It was a sign that the wound was getting better. While everyone was cheering, GMO was already able to open his eyes. When he saw the person in front of him, he was stunned at first. "Boss? Why you here? Where is this place, the Netherworld?" "The Netherworld? I'm a good person, I can't go to hell, right?" Then he was surprised. This is the military camp? I'm not dead? Why am I not dead?" Then he screamed, "Ouch! It's so painful. Who the fuck treated my wound so rudely? It's so painful and itchy. I'm going to die. It's so unbearable. Quickly scratch me, scratch my ass." Chu Yang scolded, "Don't scratch. If you scratch those wounds, won't it be terrible?" "My flesh isn't itchy." GMO begged again and again, "It's my bones that itch. Oh my god. It's as if I'm raising ants in my bones. I can't live with this feeling." Everyone broke out in cold sweat. Even with GMO's cultivation, it was difficult to endure to this extent. It could be seen that the itch in his bones was extremely sharp. Chu Yang hardened his heart and fixed GMO's entire body from top to bottom, not allowing him to move. GMO's eyes rolled around as he begged repeatedly. He said all kinds of nice New Year's greetings, but no one paid him any attention. What was miserable beyond words? Living a life worse than death? Just look at GMO this time and you'll understand everything. You'd better knock me out quickly. Oh my God. GMO groaned, I miss my unyielding second Master G. Everyone chuckled in response. Since he knew how to talk nonsense, it seemed that his injuries were no longer a big problem. Only Big Brother could have so many heavenly treasures in his storage. If it were anyone else, GMO's injuries would be really worrying. GMO, don't shout. Emotion said with a serious face, just because you said to leave first, your fourth sister-in-law left with your fourth brother. Now, these two are quarreling so much that they're about to break off their relationship. We haven't even persuaded them yet. Air was surprised. What the hell, what's this about? When did we quarrel? How did we break off our relationship? How can you, G, speak without thinking? Sure enough, GMO was instantly filled with righteous indignation. He gritted his teeth and scolded, Dong Wushang, you bastard, how can you do this? How can you hit and scold your wife? Are you still a man? I've treated Alba very well. I've never been angry with her. No matter what, I've always given in to her. Why can't you learn from me? You actually fought with your wife. I despise you. Air held her forehead with one hand. Sure enough. He's also like this. If we're not family, we won't enter the same house. They're indeed sworn brothers. Other than belittling others and praising himself, there's really nothing else to say. That's right. GMO's words are crude but reasonable. Chu Yang said seriously, Wu Shang, I have to talk to you about this. Leia is so good to you. Such a good girl can marry you. It's your good fortune that you've accumulated for several generations. How can you be like this? No matter what, even if you don't know how to make your wife happy, you can learn from me. Look at me, as the big brother, I've always been so considerate to my wives. With me as your role model, you still quarrel with your wife. It's really embarrassing for me as the big brother. You have to learn from this lesson. Air coughed repeatedly. Her forehead was full of black lines. She finally knew where the root of the problem was. It turned out that the root was here. This was how role models should be set. His brothers were all very proficient in learning from him. Chu Yang, GMO, and Emotion joined forces to condemn Dong Wushang in speech and in writing. They ruthlessly stomped on his face. Chu Le, Emo Qing Wu, Tai Bu Tian, and Wu Qian couldn't close their mouths. That's right, our men are still the best. The sky was still dark. Luo Kadi and Rui Butong arrived one after the other. After learning about the situation, they let go of their worries. Under Emotion's unintentional instigation, the two of them also joined in to criticize Dong Wushang for quarreling with his wife. They said that Dong Wushang wasn't as magnanimous as them, that he didn't love his wife as much as them, and so on. What they meant was, with someone like you quarreling with your wife, all the brothers are deeply ashamed to be associated with you. Chapter 25-21. Emole, who couldn't take it anymore, finally couldn't take it anymore and jumped out to fight for her husband. Everyone had a war of words, each with their own opinions. After a round of commotion, Emole angrily pulled Dong Wushang and started to act as a loving couple. Then, everyone said that it was fake and too pretentious. They all said that Emole was deliberately putting on an act and obviously didn't really forgive him. She was just trying to deceive them and then praised herself again. Emole, who was really angry, turned her head and pressed her lips against Dong Wushang's big mouth without any pretense. That meant, this should be enough to prove it, right? Obviously, the strength of this proof was still very strong. For a moment, whistles and cheers rang out from all directions. Some were clapping, and some were clapping, and all were in high spirits. Everyone didn't hide their glances at Dong Wushang and laughed loudly. Dong Wushang's eyes also revealed an extremely rare sly smile. Only then did Emole realize that she had been tricked by a bunch of traitors. Unable to suppress her embarrassment, she immediately turned and ran away. Only then did everyone truly feel relieved. The storm between husband and wife this time was finally over, and the sky cleared up. Was the brother more important or the wife more important? This question was a dead knot in the hearts of all the brothers' wives. They clearly knew that they shouldn't compare, but the women just had to compare. This was like the most annoying question for men. The wife just had to ask, "Am I more important or is your mother more important?" They bet that when every man heard this question, their first reaction was to beat the woman up. Wasn't this purely unreasonable? But although this question was unreasonable, the women didn't get tired of it. They just had to drive the men to the point of madness. Dong Wushang was the first to encounter such a thing, but they might also encounter it in the future. When that time came, they might really have to rely on this bunch of bad friends to save the day. The women gathered to the side to talk privately. Only then did the men heave a sigh of relief. They looked at each other and muttered helplessly, "Sigh, women are women. Well, what should we do now? What should we do specifically?" Ray Badong and Luo Kadi asked anxiously. They were the last to arrive. By the time they arrived, what was supposed to happen had already happened, and what was supposed to end had already ended. However, the frustration in their hearts did not lessen at all. Ever since they arrived, they had been filled with laughter. But as long as they saw GMO and Dong Wushang's miserable state, the two of them couldn't restrain the rage in their hearts. So much so that Rui Badong had long since made up his mind. "How dare you hurt my old brother like this? Damn it, I'll just reincarnate here again. If one time isn't enough, I'll reincarnate twice. If 2 times isn't enough, I'll do it 3 times. I'll always risk my life to fight with that Cloud Lord. Let's see who's going to die first. For now, hold back our troops to avoid alerting the enemy." Chu Yang looked at Luo Kadi meaningfully and said, "We'll wait for Lord Saint Monarch to react, and then we'll make our move." "Oh, Luo Kadi, why do you smell so good? What's going on?" Luo Kadi's face immediately turned red. He touched his body uneasily and took a sniff of his sleeve. Then he said, "What's that fragrance? Is it really that fragrant?" His incoherent words attracted the attention of the other brothers. "It's really fragrant," the others said in unison. Cough, cough. Luo Kadi coughed repeatedly, but didn't say anything for a long time. "Quickly tell us the truth." Mo Tianji assumed the posture of a judge. "What's going on? What's going on?" Under everyone's gaze, Luo Kadi shrunk his neck in embarrassment for a long time. Suddenly, he puffed out his chest, raised his head, and said, "What's the big deal? I'll tell you. I'll also tell you that my spring has arrived." Chu Yang and the others were immediately stunned by his bold words. "Spring has arrived? What does that mean? Could it be, I've also found my love?" Although Luo Kadi's face was a little red, he still finished his sentence. Like a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water, he said again, "I have a woman." Chu Yang, Mo Tianji, Ray Badong, and the others looked at each other. For a moment, they didn't know how to react. Actually, Luo Kadi once had a fiancée. That was when he was 3 days old. It was set by his clan. But later on, he suffered a blow. That woman had someone else in mind. When she told Luo Kadi face to face, Luo Kadi readily agreed to break off the engagement. That woman actually dared to tell him that she had someone else in mind. It was obvious that she had feelings for someone else. If he continued to force it, wouldn't he be a bully? Moreover, forcing a woman who didn't love him to stay by his side was also a very dangerous thing. However, Luo Kadi was depressed for a long time because of this matter. She should be his woman, but she didn't have him in her eyes. Anyone would feel uncomfortable. He also became more hardworking and crazy in his cultivation. It was only after a long time that he was no longer so silent. Although the brothers were well aware of this matter, they didn't know how to comfort him. They could only avoid talking about it. Therefore, no one mentioned this matter. But no one would have thought that Luo Kadi would actually find his long-awaited spring here. Is this real or fake? Where is it? Did you do something real? Chu Yang and Mo Tianji's eyes lit up. Did you bring it back? If it's nearby, quickly call it out. Dong Wushang, who was half lying on the bed, made Mo lay or shoot a cold look in from outside the tent. Fourth brother will help you investigate. Luo Kadi raised his chin. How can I not bring it back? It's outside now. She came with me this time. Let me tell you, she's also an expert. Really? Chu Yang was even more curious. Fourth mother. Luo Kadi opened his mouth and howled. His voice traveled far. But when Chu Yang and Mo Tianji heard this howl, they staggered. Dong Wushang, who was half lying on the bed, was also stunned. GMO, who had just woken up and was itching all over, was also suddenly stunned. Rui Badong, too, was instantly confused. Fourth mother? Luo Kadi actually called his wife fourth mother. What was this? Where did this come from? Fourth brother is Dong Wushang, okay? So what if he wants to usurp the throne? This howl really didn't seem to match the time, place, and character. Didn't he see that fourth sister-in-law was over there? Did he want to die? Luo Kadi turned around and saw the expressions on the faces of his bad friends. He instantly understood and couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. He said, "You bunch of dirty bastards, I called her fourth mother just now, not fourth mother. What are you thinking? Isn't that fourth mother?" Mo's mouth twitched. "I already said that you guys were thinking blindly. She's a sacrificial offering." Luo Kadi said angrily, "Sacrificial lady. Do you understand? A bunch of perverts." Chu Yang's and Mo Tianji's mouths closed with a kacha sound as they silently nodded. This sacrificial offering was different from the other four. Sure enough, everyone was thinking the wrong way. But can you blame us for this? When a weirdo finds a wife, he also finds a weirdo. She's a good girl, but she actually calls herself sacrificial lady. It's too ambiguous. Actually, it's not that big of a deal. GMO sighed. "I'm already very happy that you didn't find a man. I've been worried about this all this time. What if you lose confidence in that thing? Get lost." Luo Kadi roared furiously. Under Luo Kadi's call, a voice suddenly sounded. "I'm here." Chu Yang, Mo Tianji, and the others, who longed to hear a graceful voice, elegant, fresh, clear, sweet, and so on, shuddered. It seemed that not only was this voice not light and graceful at all, it was also not elegant at all. Instead, it had a strange feeling of hoarseness. This hoarseness was more like a wolf's vocal cords being torn apart. This was a girl's voice. Unexpectedly, Luo Kadi had a satisfied and complacent smile on his face. He grinned and said, "Do you know, the moment I heard her voice, I fell in love with her. I couldn't help but fall in love with her. Awu, this voice is too beautiful to me." Chu Yang and Mo Tianji's faces were as red as dates. Black lines appeared on their foreheads. Dong Wushang and GMO, who were seriously injured and bedridden, felt that they were about to faint. But why couldn't they faint? Rui Butong, who boasted that he had an indestructible nirvana body, keenly felt that he was going to die. It was so disgusting. Even his indestructible body was useless this time. In an instant, a graceful figure flashed and appeared in front of everyone. This was a woman. This could be seen from her figure. She was very tall, very graceful, and had exquisite curves. All these indicated that this was a woman. Moreover, it was a woman with a very outstanding figure. This was absolutely not the slightest bit similar to the voice just now. However, this woman was wearing a huge wolf mask on her face. She bared her fangs and was extremely ferocious. She nodded to everyone as a sign. Chu Yang coughed. Mo Tianji also coughed. Even Rui Butong, Dong Wushang, and GMO, who had just woken up, all coughed dryly at the same time. This was the so-called fake cough. It was as if everyone had collectively contracted pneumonia at this moment. Luo Kadi's face was full of smiles. "It's okay. Put down the mask. These are my best brothers. Other than you, who can't be shared with them, the rest of them are mine." This sentence was quite pleasing to the ear. However, the following words were very unpleasant. Of course, what's mine is still mine. Although they are all perverts and speak flirtatiously when they see a beauty, and will definitely be stunned when they see you later, they will definitely be jealous and hate me. But at least they know that they can't covet a friend's wife. Even if they really covet your beauty, I will stop them. I will protect you. Protect you. For life, Until the end of time, until the seas dry up and the rocks decay, this will never change. Luo Kudi said with certainty. Chapter 25-22. Who's a pervert? Who would flirt when they see a beauty? Who would covet your wife? It's only been a few days and Luo Kudi has already lost his ability to speak. What kind of nonsense is he spouting? Not to mention anything else, just based on that voice just now, how can we covet her? What kind of people does he take us for? The hoarse voice answered and then took off the mask. Chu Yang and the rest looked over at the same time. She was a sister-in-law, so she should look at her openly. They had to admit that she was a beauty. Moreover, she was an outstanding beauty. In terms of level, she was definitely one of the best. There was no doubt about that. It was just that this sister-in-law seemed to be a little different from ordinary beauties. It was just that she was too heroic. Square cheeks, cold and sharp gaze, valiant standing posture, stubborn facial features, unusually neatly tied hair. Rather than calling him a beauty, it would be better to call him an excessively beautiful man. She was actually an extremely feminine beauty. Rather than beautiful, it was better to say that she was very, very, very handsome. Hello, brothers. This beautiful priest lady cupped her fists. She was really heroic and valiant. I'm priest lady. Please give me your guidance. The moment he cupped his fists and opened his mouth, he was truly imposing, majestic and mighty. He looked like a true man of iron and blood. Chu Yang laughed dryly. You're welcome, you're welcome. Hello, priest lady. Mo Tianji's eyes were also a little dazed. He nodded repeatedly. Cough cough, pot. Luo Kudi is really lucky to have found such a good sister-in-law. Cough. He was only halfway through when GMO coughed behind him and said, I'm so itchy, all of you don't have to say things that go against your conscience, it's too fake. Priest lady waved her hand casually. We're all brothers, don't be so hypocritical. We're good men of the martial world, and we're all about being like-minded. Although I'm not ugly, I'm not a beauty either. I'm self-aware of this. But, as a good man of the martial world, I think I'm quite qualified. Miss. Good man. True man. Dong Wuxiang gave her a thumbs up. I like your character. The sacrificial lady opened her mouth and laughed. How forthright. Too motherfucking manly. No, it should be too motherfucking girly. The corners of Chu Yang and Mo Tianji's mouths twitched at the same time. Then, they enthusiastically invited their brother's wife to sit down. Sacrificial lady. GMO, who was lying on the side, suddenly let out a sorrowful sigh filled with longing. When I heard you speak, I suddenly thought of my wife. Pfft. Dong Wuxiang and Rui Badong spurted out simultaneously. Get lost. Luo Kudi said angrily, do you think I'm like you? My wife is a big shot with a big background. Do you know that there's an organization called Wolves of Heaven in this Heaven Imperial Court? Everyone nodded in agreement. This was definitely not an act. It was truly a thunderous name. This Wolves of Heavenly Imperial Court was definitely a renowned native organization in Heaven Pass. Everyone here was well informed. How could they not know about this notorious but extremely powerful bandit organization? My wife is the alpha wolf of the Wolves of Heavenly Imperial Court. Luo Kudi's very, very proud words had directly shocked everyone, causing them to be bewildered. Such a beautiful woman was actually the alpha wolf? Now, our nicknames have also changed. But it's even more appropriate now. Luo Kudi said proudly, the two of us are called the male and female wolf emperors. Cough, 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 cough. In the tent, there was a series of coughs. The brothers covered their bellies at the same time. After all, they couldn't go overboard in front of their new sister-in-law. They were really embarrassed to laugh out loud. But it was really too funny. They couldn't take it anymore. I'm so itchy. GMO made a sound that didn't seem to be in much pain. Actually, even though it was still itchy now, it was already much, much better. However, if he didn't use this excuse to make a sound, GMO was afraid that his old injury would relapse due to the explosive laughter. Then, it wouldn't be worth it. So, he might as well do it once. After the introduction, the sacrificial lady sat down graciously. She really wasn't petty at all. She was very generous. I say, how did the two of you know each other? Mo Tianji tried to find something to talk about. Back then, our heavenly armament pavilion robbed everywhere. Intentionally or unintentionally, we robbed the wolves of Tian, Quebec. Therefore, they weren't convinced. They always came to find trouble with me. Luo Kadi beamed with joy. I couldn't beat her in the past. But after Mo Yun Tian returned, she wasn't my opponent anymore. I beat her up. Then, the two of us rolled down the cliff at the same time. Luo Kadi gestured. Why don't you tell the truth? Who wasn't your opponent? The sacrificial lady retorted. You also said that we are all brothers here. Why can't you tell the truth? It was obviously you who couldn't beat me. So, when we were about to lose, you carried me and jumped down the cliff. Luo Kadi nodded repeatedly. Yes, it was like that. Then, the two of us were injured at the bottom of the cliff. We couldn't go up for a while. It was quite lonely. As he said this, he glanced at GMO. Damn. GMO was furious. Why are the two of you looking at me when you're lonely? What does your loneliness have to do with me? Cough, cough. Luo Kadi coughed dryly and said, then after a few days at the bottom of the cliff, we realized that for some reason, we actually slept together. I really didn't know what was going on at that time. Ouch. Luo Kadi cried out in pain. The sacrificial lady had already taken over the conversation and said, at that time, everyone was bored to death. So, we got to know each other and felt that we were quite compatible. So, we decided to be together for life. That's all. Nothing else. Chu Yang, Mo Tianji and the others let out an "oh" at the same time. It was very meaningful. Hearing this "oh," even the self-proclaimed iron-blooded sacrificial lady couldn't help but blush. It was unknown whether it was out of embarrassment or out of embarrassment. Without hiding it, she glared fiercely at Chu Yang and Mo Tianji. Not to mention anything else, just this glare was really manly. So, from then on, the two of us were together. Luo Kadi said matter-of-factly, anyway, she doesn't have a husband and I don't have a wife. Together, it was a match made in heaven. Besides, my first time, her first time. At this point, there was a scream. The embarrassed sacrificial lady had kicked him out. Chu Yang and the others wanted to laugh but were too embarrassed to do so. They huffed and puffed as they tried to hold it in. It was really very tiring. Dong Wushang finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He actually forced himself to stand up. His cultivation hadn't recovered, so his ability to hold back his laughter was naturally not as good as the others. Although GMO was more seriously injured than him, he still had the itch to offset his laughter. Instead, he was the one who had the most endurance to fight. Dong Wushang struggled to stand up, but moving was really too tiring. Emole just happened to walk in and hurriedly went over to help him. You guys discuss? I have to go and rest. Lei is also very tired these few days. Anyway, with you guys here, we can relax. When you guys are done discussing, I'll do whatever you say. Using my brain is really not my job. Dong Wushang said with a silly smile. He had to avoid this place and find a place to vent his laughter. Otherwise, he would really go crazy from laughing at this pair of wolf kings. Yes. Chu Yang suddenly realized and took out a bottle of Spring of Life. Drink this later and then sleep with Lei. Your injuries should be more or less healed. Before he finished speaking, he saw Emole's face suddenly turn red. She spat out a mouthful of saliva. Beside them, GMO and Luo Kadi seemed to be unable to hold it in anymore and started laughing maniacally. Obviously, Chu Yang's words completely ignited everyone's laughter. Chu Yang couldn't help but be stunned. Thinking back, he realized that his words seemed to have an obvious meaning. It was hard not to be misunderstood. First, he gave Dong Wushang a bottle of medicine and then warned him to sleep with Lei. This sentence seemed really a little inappropriate. For a moment, even with Chu Yang's thick skin, he couldn't help but blush. He explained awkwardly, I didn't mean that. This is a bottle of Spring of Life. It's not that. Wushang doesn't need that. Don't misunderstand. Everyone, don't misunderstand. Bah. Emole, didn't dare to listen anymore. She snatched the spring of life from Chu Yang's hand and spat out a mouthful of saliva. She pulled Dong Wushang and disappeared from the tent with a whoosh, only a bunch of detestable fellows who were laughing so hard that their eyes couldn't be seen. Luo Kadi and the rest were laughing so hard that their bodies were twitching. They were patting their stomachs, thighs and buttocks. GMO was laughing so hard that the bones that had just been reconnected creaked. He felt a piercing pain, but he still couldn't help but continue laughing. Chu Yang was extremely innocent. He said unjustly, "I really didn't mean that." Early morning of the second day. When the bodies of those killers were thrown out of the camp, there was an obvious commotion in the opposing army. They had already predicted that they wouldn't return for a night, and now there were so many bodies that confirmed their prediction even more. They had all been killed. All troops, pay attention. A loud shout rang out. All troops, prepare to attack. Avenge His Majesty the Celestial Emperor. Avenge our dead comrades. Boom. The million-strong army answered in unison, their voices shaking the world. Just as Emole predicted, the deaths of these killers were the last straw that broke the camel's back. The Extreme Heaven army finally couldn't take it anymore. Swords were unsheathed and arrows were nocked. It seemed like this battle was already destined to be unavoidable. At this moment, a burly figure appeared in front of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's camp. Great Emperor Wushang. Dong Wushang stood out with his hands behind his back. He looked down at the million-strong army as if he didn't see them. Chapter 25-23. I won't say anything about accepting defeat. It's meaningless. Dong Wushang's voice was filled with determination and battle intent. If you want to fight, we'll accompany you anytime. Accepting defeat. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. When Heavenly Emperor Merciless fought with Heavenly Emperor Wushang, they had agreed beforehand that the winner would be king. Even though Heavenly Emperor Merciless had already died, that was still the promise he made. It was also the last command the Heavenly Emperor of Ruthlessness gave to his subordinates in this life. Tens of millions of people could bear witness to this. Promises and orders would not change because of anything or for any reason. If they fought with Wu Shang's army now, it was equivalent to going against Heavenly Emperor Merciless' last order. The few generals leading the army were struggling fiercely. Their faces were full of sweat, and their lips were trembling. However, their eyes finally turned cold. The general in purple raised his hand, and his eyes became more and more cruel and bloodthirsty. Obviously, the moment his hand fell, it was the signal for the two armies to officially start the war. He did not want to change his original intention, even if it was Heavenly Emperor Merciless' last order. I can also reject this order. When the general is outside, the monarch has his own orders. I must take revenge for Heavenly Emperor Merciless. However, at this critical moment, a voice suddenly came from midair. Stop! Golden light suddenly shone in the sky. A sacred and inviolable light spread rapidly, forming a circle of light. It was as if a god had descended into the world at this moment. A person wearing a bright yellow robe and a crown appeared in midair with his hands behind his back. Beside and behind him, there were also ceremonial guards who bowed. They were densely packed. There were no less than a few hundred people. What a grand style! However, everyone's eyes were only focused on him. It was as if he was born with the charisma to become the center of attention. Naturally, all the attention was gathered on him. Your Majesty Saint! Everyone in the Extreme Heaven Imperial Army immediately knelt down and saluted. Hundreds of generals cried out, Your Majesty Saint, please uphold justice for Heavenly Emperor Merciless. This person was, of course, the supreme ruler of the Heaven Imperial Court, the only saint, Cloud Master. Cloud Master sighed softly. He said, Everyone, please rise. This seat is very clear about the loyalty and passion of the generals. This seat also completely understands your feelings. I'm proud of Heavenly Emperor Wuqing. Although he is dead now, He still has you loyal subordinates. This is precisely the embodiment of the Heavenly Emperor emotionless personal charm that ordinary people find hard to imagine. In terms of feelings, this seat should indeed take revenge for Heavenly Emperor emotionless. After all, we were both Heavenly Emperors for 1,000,000 years, and we were also friends who went through life and death together. You've made my heart ache. But logically speaking, I can't do that. Heavenly Emperor Emotionless already made a promise before the final battle. The winner is king. The Heavenly Emperor of Heartless has always been a man of his word. Now that he's dead, how can we let his final promise become a joke? Isn't this the greatest blasphemy to the heartless Heavenly Emperor? The sage's words. It was reasonable. All the soldiers had tears in their eyes at this moment. His Majesty Heavenly Emperor Merciless died in a fair battle. As I said before, the living have no regrets, the dead have no regrets, the winner is king. All of you. As the most loyal subordinates of Heavenly Emperor Emotionless, do you want Heavenly Emperor Emotionless to be humiliated after his death? At this point, the 3,000,000 Heavenly Emperor Emotionless soldiers felt what the sage was going to do. All of them had tears in their eyes, and a strong sense of powerlessness arose in their hearts. This seed is here today. I'm here to carry out Heavenly Emperor Emotionless wishes and announce to the world that Dong Wuxiang is the Extreme Sky Heavenly Emperor, known as Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang. From now on, Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang will be the ruler of Extreme Sky. I hope that we can see a more peaceful Extreme Heaven, and not one filled with war and war. The sage's words were very heavy, and even full of gunpowder. It faintly revealed the hegemony of those who followed him would prosper, and those who opposed him would perish. Thank you, Lord Sage, for upholding justice. Although Dong Wuxiang hated this sage to the bones at this time, he still had to show a sincere attitude to express his gratitude. Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang is too polite. Master Yun showed a warm and amiable smile in a ball of golden light. From now on, Extreme Sky will depend on Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang. I hope Heavenly Emperor Wuxiang can take revenge and glorify Extreme Sky. Dong Wuxiang agreed and said loudly, Heavenly Emperor Emotionless soldiers, listen up. Today, I announce that I'm having a fair battle with Heavenly Emperor Emotionless. The living have no regrets, and the dead have no regrets. I admire everyone's loyalty, so I'll take my leave for now. I can promise that everyone here won't blame me. Everyone, stay in your original positions. I won't pursue this matter. Then, Dong Wuxiang announced a series of government and military orders. These were all written by Mo Tianji in an hour's time. Even if it wasn't said that every word was like a gem, it was more or less the same. Dong Wuxiang recited it for a long time, but he could still only understand a part of it. Now that he said it here, he really couldn't describe the original meaning. Many words were simply forgotten and changed by himself. Fortunately, the meaning was similar, and there weren't any major mistakes. But Mo Tianji still frowned as he listened from behind. How did Dong Wuxiang turn a proper Heavenly Emperor inauguration speech into something like a bandit gathering? Mo Tianji frowned. I've put in so much effort, but it's completely useless now. It doesn't even have the slightest bit of my original flavor. What the hell? Everyone laughed in unison. Whether it was the inauguration of the Heavenly Emperor or the bandit gathering, this battle didn't happen under Master Yun's watch. Dong Wuxiang could be considered to have truly obtained the official recognition of Extreme Sky. At this moment, there were many things waiting to be done. They just had to wait for a little recovery before holding an inauguration ceremony. Then, everything would be considered to be in order. But before that, Dong Wuxiang could already use the identity of Extreme Sky Emperor to give orders. Everything had finally taken a step forward, stumbling and bumping. As the Heavenly Emperor emotionless soldiers reluctantly retreated, the Wuxiang Heavenly Army finally entered Wuxiang City. Almost immediately, someone suggested to change the name of this city to Wuxiang City. This suggestion was reasonable. As the saying goes, a new ruler brings a new ruler. The fall of a ruler also signified the rise of another ruler. The rise of a new ruler even if it didn't erase the previous ruler's traces, would inevitably destroy the previous ruler's symbolic things. There was no exception to this. Drunken Wuqing's name was Wushang, and it was passed down as Wushang. Even the name of the capital was Wushang. Now that Dong Wushang was the ruler of this place, there was no reason to use the old name. Everyone thought that there was nothing wrong with this suggestion. But unexpectedly, Dong Wushang firmly rejected this suggestion. This city shall be called Wushang City, and it will never change. Dong Wushang said, Heavenly Emperor Wushang was a good man, and he deserves to be remembered by everyone. I don't want to erase his traces. If this action came from Chu Yang or Mo Tianji, there was a high chance that it was utilitarian and fame. But from Dong Wushang, it was completely sincere. After understanding the sorrowful life of Heavenly Emperor Wushang, he finally died in a heroic battle. There were many indescribable feelings in Dong Wushang's heart, but his firm rejection made all the heavenly soldiers of Wushang feel a lot better. To these people, Dong Wushang's action, whether or not it was to win people's hearts, was good. As long as the traces of Heavenly Emperor Wushang weren't erased, it was worth it. Even if it was to win people's hearts, this action was done beautifully. When entering Wushang City, Chu Yang and the others naturally wouldn't show their faces. They deliberately hid their strength and mixed in with the guards. Everyone entered together, and everything went smoothly. The army entered, and the military power was established. Next, it was naturally to take over the political power. A small half of the Heavenly Emperor Wushang's military officials resigned on the spot. With Mo Tianji's various methods, he persuaded them one by one with emotion and reason. Finally, he managed to keep 70 to 80% of them. As for the rest, he couldn't keep them and could only send them away regretfully. A loyal official would not serve two masters. Regardless of anything else, these people who had voluntarily resigned from their positions were worthy of being retained based on their strength of character. If they could be retained, they would be retained. If they couldn't be retained, Chu Yang, Mo Tianji, and the others would only respect them even more. As for those who warmly welcomed Heavenly Emperor Wushang's ascension, Dong Wushang always looked at them from the corner of his eyes. Under Mo Tianji and Chu Yang's management, most of these people were removed from their positions. There was also a small portion who had their entire family wiped out. Dong Wushang had a very stubborn thought in his heart. Those who were loyal to their previous master couldn't be that bad. As for those who couldn't wait to change sides and sing praises, no matter how strong they are, I won't use them. I didn't know you before this. Do you know who I am and what abilities I have? Why should you support me? No matter what, Heavenly Emperor Wushang led you for hundreds of thousands of years. Even if it was a short time, it should have been at least a few thousand years. You don't have any nostalgia? Such a cold-blooded person. Even if you have the talent to rule the world, what can you do? It had to be said that this kind of thinking was more than enough to measure a hero. However, it was definitely not suitable for ruling a country. It was even less suitable for being a heavenly emperor. However, the most awesome thing about Dong Wushang was that he never wanted to be a heavenly emperor. At best, he was just here to make a transition. It was just to complete the heavenly mission of killing the heavenly demons. That was all. Sitting on the heavenly emperor's seat under someone else's, but especially under the control of a saint monarch's subordinates, was very uncomfortable. Moreover, there were all kinds of hidden dangers. If not for this, Dong Wushang wouldn't have become a heavenly emperor. As for after killing the heavenly demons, Chapter 25-24. Dong Wushang immediately turned into a military maniac who trained his troops with all his might after making a bold and decisive reorganization. The entire process took him less than 3 days. This was how swift and decisive he was. As for other government affairs, Dong Wushang didn't care about them at all. If I don't care about government affairs, I'll let whoever wants to care. Chu Yang and the others were annoyed by this. You're the fucking heavenly emperor. If you don't care, who else will? Dong Wushang threw the Extreme Heaven Imperial Jade Seal into Mo Tianji's arms. You're my third brother. You help me. Even if you don't do it, I won't do it. It doesn't matter if it's completely ruined. I'll only care about training the troops. I'll only care about having a strong army to enter purple cloud heavens. I'm not interested in anything else. Mo Tianji was so angry that his nose was crooked. However, in the face of such a hands-off boss, even Mo Tianji, who was as wise as the sea and as profound as a mountain, was also at his wits' end and helpless. Dong Wushang could ignore it, but he himself couldn't, right? He could only transfer a guy from his intelligence department who was in charge of overall planning to the Extreme Heaven Imperial Jade Seal and appoint him as the Prime Minister. This new Prime Minister used to be Mo Tianji's right-hand man. He had the same high position and authority. He was also under one person and above many people. He was a great talent, but now, in order to let Mo Tianji escape, he didn't hesitate to sell out his right-hand man. Fortunately, this new Prime Minister was addicted to being an official. Although he was under one person and above many people in the past, he didn't have any official recognition. Now that he suddenly became the Prime Minister of a heavenly emperor, he became complacent and started to deal with government affairs as if his butt was on fire. Under Mo Tianji's watch, he quickly got to work like a fish in water. Because of this, there was even a joke. The new Extreme Heaven Heavenly Emperor, Dong Wushang, didn't know the name of this new Prime Minister. When he saw him, he naturally greeted him with, "Hey, who's that?" The military officials were all dissatisfied and complained about this. However, no matter what, this Lord Heavenly Emperor still gave everyone too much space to display their abilities. He completely delegated the authority to let everyone display their abilities. This could also be considered a benefit, right? Also, His Majesty the Celestial Emperor vigorously reorganized the army and intended to restore the glory of the Purple Heavenly Imperial Palace. This was also a heroic act. Therefore, everyone adopted a tolerant attitude towards the Celestial Emperor's inaction. Even during the enthronement ceremony, Dong Wushang had only said, "I think so." It could be omitted. Xie Dan Qiong had rushed here from hundreds of thousands of miles away. He hadn't even sat down properly when he heard these words. "Back then, I held such a grand ceremony. How can you omit it here? Where do you place me?" What was even more infuriating was what Dong Wushang said next, which directly ignited a war between two newly ascended celestial emperors. Great Emperor Wushang continued, "Actually, I feel that not only can the ceremony be omitted, it should be ignored. It was like a ritual. Those who care about these things, this heavenly emperor thinks that they are all idiots." Emperor Jasper Flower was infuriated by this and had a fierce fight with Emperor Wushang. The fundamental reason was not whether or not to hold the ceremony. It was such a good idea. Why didn't he say so earlier? Now you're even scolding old master as an idiot. Very, very few people knew. Just as Dong Wushang's army entered Merciless City, another major event happened at another location. Or it should be said that when Dong Wushang and Demo Lei returned to their tent, this matter had already happened and was in progress. The white-robed man that the saint had transformed into naturally wouldn't watch his target run away. In fact, he had been observing the movements in Wu Shang's camp. When he discovered that the atmosphere in the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's camp had changed, it should be said that Dong Wushang had returned. He originally wanted to enter again immediately. This fellow who could replace drunk Wu Qing and bring him even greater benefits must be in his hands as soon as possible, to prevent any unforeseen events from happening. But just as he was about to enter, he was surprised to discover that there was a person in midair, staring at him coldly. Seeing the person who came, the saint's thoughts changed. He soared up and welcomed that person. With a warm and amiable expression, he asked, "Exelu, why are you here?" Opposite him, the white-robed demon empress had an undisguised look of disgust on her face. "Cloud Master, don't force me to attack. The most annoying thing in my life is when people call me by my nickname." Cloud Master laughed heartily and sincerely. "I only said that because I care about you. We haven't seen each other for tens of thousands of years. I miss my little sister, from the bottom of my heart." The demon empress still said sarcastically, "You're thinking about Yao Huangqian, right? How could you be thinking about me?" Cloud Master shook his head and laughed bitterly. Your words are still as sharp as ever. It's hard to resist. The Demon Empress said indifferently, just now, you went in and caused a ruckus in the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's camp, but you didn't kill anyone. The saint smiled and said, I have to say that this young man's potential is quite great. Back then, when you and I were at his age, we didn't have such strength. We were far from him. His tone was filled with admiration and sincerity. It was like a kind grandfather who saw that his naughty grandson had finally grown up and was comforted. The Demon Empress laughed coldly. So you went and beat him up? To announce your existence? The saint smiled bitterly and shook his head. I naturally have a purpose when I do things. He raised his head sincerely and looked at the Demon Empress. But I can't tell you my real thoughts now. You have to understand this. After all, this is the extreme heaven, and my base is located here. Except, you should understand me. The Demon Empress laughed coldly. What a clean excuse. Of course, I have to express my understanding. But if you attack again, I'll come out and fight you. Also, I'll expose your identity and see if you can tell this clean excuse to the world. The saint was startled when he heard this. Then he smiled bitterly from the bottom of his heart. Alright, since you said so, I won't touch him. I didn't expect this Dong Wuxiang to be related to you. Whether he's related or not, it has nothing to do with you. The Demon Empress said coldly, Aren't you going to deal with this situation? The saint laughed and turned to leave. The Demon Empress's eyes flashed and she instantly disappeared. Because of the Demon Empress' sudden arrival, the saint changed his plan unhappily. For now, he would acknowledge Dong Wuxiang's identity and status and let him stay in the extreme heaven. Then he would slowly think of a way to deal with him. As long as he stayed in the extreme heaven, he wouldn't be afraid of him flying to the heavens. The Demon Empress could protect him for a while, but could she protect him forever? But why did the Demon Empress suddenly come here? The saint was thinking about this. Could it be that the power behind Dong Wuxiang was actually the Demon Empress? Dong Wuxiang was actually the Demon Empress spy? Otherwise, with the Demon Empress' high status, why would she suddenly appear here? It looked like she was protecting Dong Wuxiang, but if it was really the Demon Empress, wouldn't she expose herself by jumping out so brazenly? The saint frowned as he thought about it. He still couldn't figure it out. Dong Wuxiang was really the Demon Empress spy, then controlling Dong Wuxiang was equivalent to having the opportunity to control the Demon Empress, the most difficult enemy to deal with. And once he controlled the Demon Empress, wouldn't it be equivalent to controlling the entire Demon Emperor sky? Master Yun smiled indifferently, looking like an immortal, holy, and refined. But in his heart, dozens of ways to make use of Dong Wuxiang to control the Demon Empress flashed through his mind. Every method was different, and the only similarity was that they were all unscrupulous. Because even if Dong Wuxiang wasn't the Demon Empress spy, since the Demon Empress was willing to appear today to help, Dong Wuxiang was destined to be related to her. Furthermore, he might even use Dong Wuxiang's matter to reap bigger fish, but he had to speed up the pace of dealing with this matter. Although the extreme heaven was still in a precarious situation, it had finally come to an end for the time being. But at this moment, there was a huge awkwardness in the extreme heaven sword alliance's arena. Because of all the complicated matters, the various super sex competition that Chu Yang had tossed to the back of his mind was finally held today. But the various contestants and the young leaders of the various sects were all unwilling to go up on stage. The reason was very simple, and it was very consistent. Everyone was ashamed. Yun Tian, Mo Lu, Zi Huang, and the others were no longer as high-spirited and proud as before. Only melancholy and vexation were left in their bellies. How could they still have the face to go up on stage? Originally, they thought that this competition would determine the influential figures of the new generation, and this decision would also indirectly determine the situation of the next hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. Those who could stand out here would be influential figures in the future. The world's winds and clouds would be stirred up and surging under their hands. However, from the looks of it now, this super grand competition had completely lost its meaning. It was completely meaningless. Because even if they really obtained the number one in the world here, so what? Was there any meaning? Their old enemy, Chu Yang, used the excuse of killing the son of the Dark Cloud Heaven's Emperor, Yuan Tianji, and fled all the way. Under the pursuit of the entire Dark Cloud Heaven, not only was he safe and sound, but his strength and influence had also increased greatly. In the Demon Emperor Heaven, he established the Heavenly Armament Pavilion and shook the world. Now, after experiencing countless hardships and dangers, even Yuan Tianji had died, but Chu Yang was still alive and kicking. According to reliable sources, Chu Yang had already attained the cultivation of a high-level saint. Chapter 25-25. But now, the young Chu Yang was already a high-level saint while they were still at the celestial being level. They actually wanted to fight for the title of number one person of the younger generation. What kind of face did they have? Not to mention Chu Yang, the other young person, Xie Danqiong, seemed to be about the same age as Chu Yang. Now, he was already a heavenly emperor of Moyun Heaven, on equal footing with Di Ho. This achievement was even more shocking and unprecedented. It seemed that when Di Ho was at their age, she also didn't have such achievements. It was just that this achievement was unprecedented but definitely not unprecedented. Because there was another young person, Dong Wushang, who was also a young man, ascending to the position of Celestial Emperor of Extreme Heaven. It seemed that it wasn't just these two people. There were another two young people, Gu Duxing and Ao Shiyun, who were currently challenging for the position of Celestial Emperor of the other two worlds. And the chances of success were very high. Thinking of this, Yun Tian, Stranger and Zi Huang even had the thought of dying. What was there to talk about competing on the stage? For a moment, the Sky Sword Alliance arena fell into a deadlock. Too awkward. Dreamlike Secular World and the other Super Sex members were gloating over their misfortune. Aren't you very awesome? Aren't you able to manipulate the rules? Aren't you able to bring it forward? Now you're all dumbfounded. Heaven is watching what people do. What's the use of doing all this for no reason? You can control people, but can you control heaven? Snow Immortal, who hadn't been seen for a long time, stood there with a smile on her face. And beside her was naturally the infatuated Wu Zhangxiu who had been chasing Snow Immortal for tens of thousands of years. But at this moment, even that bald head of Wu Zhangxiu seemed to be exuding excitement. Tens of thousands of years of yearning finally got what he wanted. How could he not be excited? How could he not be elated and proud? Wu Zhangxiu was so excited that he almost fainted and never woke up again. Or maybe he was afraid that he was actually dreaming and would wake up from it. His dream turned into nothing. That day, when Snow Immortal took the initiative to look for him and asked that question, Wu Zhangxiu felt that he had started to dream. And from then on, the dream started. He never woke up. Even if it was really a dream. Wu Zhangxiu would rather not wake up. Will you marry me? Shui Xian's words were like the sound of nature to Wu Zhangxiu. Furthermore, it was an extremely good aphrodisiac. Blood gushed out of her nose on the spot. Yes, of course. Wu Zhangxiu stammered. They didn't know what to say. It had been almost 2 years since that moment, but Wu Zhangxiu was still happy every day. In the past, every day without her felt like a year, and there were 3 autumns in a day. Now that he had her, he was extremely happy. Boundless happiness. Shui Xian stood quietly beside him. Her expression seemed to be a little gentle. She seemed to have sensed that Wu Zhangxiu was distracted and asked, "What's wrong? What are you thinking about?" Wu Zhangxiu scratched his bald head and laughed foolishly. "I'm wondering, am I dreaming?" His voice could be said to be extremely lewd. "Bah!" Shui Xian spat with a red face, but a smile appeared on her face. The most comfortable people here were none other than Shifty Cat and Chrysanthemum Saber King Li Guanyu. Heavenly Armament Pavilion? No matter which world Heavenly Armament Pavilion it was, strictly speaking, not a political force. It was still a civilian force. To put it bluntly, it was the so-called Jianghu faction. Although Chu Yang's Heavenly Armament Pavilion's current strength had already surpassed any of the big sects by who knows how many times. However, before Chu Yang officially walked to the front stage, Heavenly Armament Pavilion was still a Jianghu power. Even to the martial artists, in their hearts, Heavenly Armament Pavilion's foundation might not be comparable to the old super sections. Since it belonged to the Jianghu faction, it naturally had to participate in this kind of competition. Especially when all the Jianghu factions in the Heaven Imperial Court participated, even the Heavenly Armament Pavilion was so disdainful. But they still sent people to participate, and the leader of this competition was Teacher Cat, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. Yes, Shifty Cat. He was in charge of accompanying and protecting Chrysanthemum Saber King Li Guanyu. Here, Shifty Cat finally realized the value of his own life and met the opponent he dreamed of, Chao Yueguan. When both sides met, they didn't pay any attention to the so-called elite competition in front of them. They were always together debating and chatting. The relationship between both sides quickly warmed up. It was like they were old friends at first sight, and they instantly understood each other. Gradually, it reached a high level of enthusiasm. Coincidentally, Li Guanyu was also a learned person. Of course, he participated in such a deep debate. I'm Li Guanyu. Hello, Chao Yueguan. I'm Chao Yueguan. Hello, Li Guanyu. Li Guanyu, Chao Yueguan. Shifty Cat jumped up and down. Why are you so polite? Hurry up and listen to me. This is serious. All the big sects were at a loss for what to do about this strange phenomenon, because this was already an unavoidable reality. In the face of the shocking achievements of those few young people, if they continued to participate in the competition of the younger generation, no matter what reason they used to modify or cover it up, it would be such a joke. But so many people here had already come. What else could they do? They couldn't give up halfway, right? Giving up halfway would only be more embarrassing. If we don't want to become a laughingstock, there's only one way now. Yun Tian frowned and said, there's only one way left. Actually, the feasibility of this method is still relatively high, especially the significance behind this method. It has a long history that cannot be ignored. What method? What method? Everyone's eyes lit up. At such a crucial moment, there was actually such a method. What kind of life-saving straw was this? Naturally, everyone was very interested. That is, to truly organize those young geniuses, to fight on this field. Yun Tian's gaze slowly swept across everyone. I believe everyone knows that I'm talking about those young people. Those who have just joined the sect for less than 3 years. Young geniuses. Young geniuses? Thinking of this, everyone's eyes lit up. That's right. This was indeed the best strategy they could use to deal with the situation. Back then, when they brought back the children from the various sects from the East Royal Heavens, they were all snatched up. It was as if it was a miracle. Every one of them was a top-notch genius. According to the principle of passing down the legacy, every sect placed great importance on these children, because this group of children was the true hope of their sect's future. For the competition this time, each sect had brought their most outstanding disciples over, just so that they could witness every battle that took place here at a close distance. This was extremely significant to their growth. They were still very weak now, but their future was infinitely bright. If they were allowed to fight to determine the final ranking of this year's martial arts competition, this was indeed the best solution. Chu Yang, Dong Wushang, Xie Dan Qiong and the rest would not compare themselves with a bunch of real children, right? In the entire Heaven Imperial Court, no one would compare themselves like that. Therefore, this helpless choice turned out to be a brilliant move. That's what we'll do. Everyone reached a consensus in an instant. For the top 10 super sects, each sect would send out 10 people. From the 11th to the 20th place, each sect would send out 5 people. For those below the 20th place, each sect would send out 3 people. Next was to inform, set the rules, draw lots to determine the order of battle. A series of complicated procedures was completed in the shortest time. At this moment, the eyes of every child that was brought here burst out with a ball of light without any warning. Our Heavenly Armament Pavilion. our heavenly armament. Today, we finally stepped onto the first stage that belongs to us. The elders of the various sects began to teach the geniuses of their sects how to fight, how to proceed, how to hide their strength, how to give the enemy a fatal blow at the right time, what you need to pay attention to, which are your formidable opponents, which people's martial arts can restrain you, what are the targeted countermeasures. Every child nodded their heads repeatedly at these teachings. Next, the battle began. It had to be said that the performance of every child made the elders behind them smile crookedly. They were really geniuses, but if there was something that wasn't satisfactory, the only thing that was lacking was that the battle atmosphere between these children was unusually intense, but the killing intent was not high. It seemed that they had completely implemented the plan that everyone had proposed before the battle, learning from each other. Everyone was strictly implementing this point: only victory and defeat, not life and death, and completely not hurting feelings. Regarding this point, the old fellows seemed to be somewhat unhappy. We say that we are exchanging pointers, and of course, we are exchanging pointers. However, you should also take this opportunity to suppress your opponents. They will be your formidable opponents for the next hundreds of thousands of years. If you can defeat one of them, it's one of them. Is there a need to be so merciful? After all, they are still children and don't have the killing intent. They still need to be carefully trained in the future. All of this, these old fellows naturally found a very reasonable reason for the young geniuses. Obviously, these old fellows didn't know that a seed of loyalty had long been planted in these children's minds. No matter if the person opposite them knew them or not, as long as there was a string on their neck, a heavenly armament card hanging on the string, that would be my brothers, sisters, and friends. In short, that would be someone worthy of my protection. Because we are the same kind of people, we are all that person's people. Chapter 25-26. Although they knew that this mission was too difficult to complete, they wouldn't give up if they didn't work hard. In this world, there were only things that couldn't be thought of, but there was nothing that couldn't be done. Everyone immediately gathered the generals under their command and shouted as loudly as they could. Everyone, do your best. This is the first order of Emperor Wuxiang since he ascended the throne. If you can't complete it, don't think about bringing glory to your ancestors. It's so shameful. If anyone messes up the old one, everyone's clan will be exterminated. No matter if it's you guys accompanying the old one or the old one accompanying you guys, we'll walk together. When those military bigwigs were giving out orders and racking their brains to complete the mission at all costs, Chu Yang and the rest were already walking on the official road. This time, they appeared on the road as a group of merchants. They walked at a leisurely pace, and it could even be said that they were leisurely without the slightest hint of nervousness. It wasn't that they weren't anxious, but because the current extreme heavens was still filled with a large number of saint monarchs. Every place was closely monitored. They believed that as long as they revealed the slightest bit of abnormal impatience, it would immediately attract the attention of various parties, causing unnecessary trouble and causing unnecessary consequences. Dong Wuxiang's identity as the new heavenly emperor was really too awkward. Right now, he was at the peak of his power and was in high spirits. Not only was he not ruling the world in the imperial capital, he was traveling in disguise. Even if he didn't want to attract attention, it was impossible. So everyone could only be patient and move at this tortoise-like speed. Right now, the most important thing was to keep Sage Master Yun in check. He absolutely couldn't alert the enemy. Let him stay in Merciless City and continue to search for his so-called chance to control Dong Wuxiang and Mo. It was because of this reason and this consideration that the Demon Empress still stayed in Merciless City. What she was responsible for was to create a misconception for Saint Monarch. Dong Wuxiang was still in Merciless City. The reason why Cloud Master couldn't find Dong Wuxiang and Mo was very obvious. It was because the Demon Empress was there. Naturally, she had many methods to hide Dong Wuxiang and Mo and not let Cloud Master find them. This was a logical thing to do. After the sudden attack of the mysterious people and the counterattack of the mysterious people in the palace, If Dong Wushang and Mo Lei appeared in front of people again, that would be a completely brainless and unwise move. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji thought over and over again and finalized this plan. Although all the subsequent developments were unexpected, it was reasonable. This was precisely the method of hiding the real from the false, and hiding the false from the real to the extreme. Of course, for this plan to succeed, there were two people who were indispensable. One of them was Yun Shangren. Yun Shangren was also an intelligent person. However, it was precisely because of his intelligence that he fell for this trick that targeted people like him. The other person was the Demon Empress. Originally, with the Demon Empress status, doing such a thing was like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. But now, other than the Demon Empress, there was no one else who could make Master Yun truly believe in the scheme that everyone had set up. Moreover, he was truly trapped in it. Moreover, he was able to restrain Cloud Master with his strength alone. This situation might last for a long time. At the very least, it had to be maintained until Chu Yang and Mo Tianji and the others left the public sight, entered the vast forest, and found the secret base of the 10,000 Saints' true spirits in the terrifying forest of the Heavenly Stem Mountain. However, no one was uncertain about how long they would be able to confuse the enemy. Mo Tianji was not sure, and Chu Yang was also not sure. Therefore, they had to be cautious. In another distant world, the big western sky, Gu Duxing was dressed in black and wielding a sword. He stood at the peak of the mountain, watching the great battle of thousands of soldiers and horses below the mountain. The place where he was, naturally, had sword energy soaring to the heavens. Sister Xiao Miao and Gu Miao Ling were by his side. A pair of beautiful eyes were also watching the rapidly changing battle situation below the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, the army belonging to the Heavenly Armament Pavilion was crazily attacking like a tsunami. The army belonging to the crazed sword Heavenly Emperor Wu Yaquang was also doing their best to support, defend, and counterattack. Both sides were already in full swing at this moment. Everyone's eyes had already turned red from killing. The only difference was that the generals and soldiers of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion could not help but sneak back every once in a while, or when their position just happened to be able to see the mountain peak over there. As long as they saw that tall and straight figure with sword energy soaring to the heavens on the mountain peak, everyone would feel as if they had eaten a tranquilizer. Their confidence increased 100 times, and they were full of courage. Our solitary emperor is still here. He is still paying attention to the battlefield, paying attention to us. We, the solitary emperor, have never left the battlefield alone. We have always been fighting together with us. This kind of spiritual strength could truly display an unparalleled strength in many cases. Compared to the crazed sword heavenly soldiers opposite, the difference in strength between both sides was really incalculable. This spiritual support completely changed the situation of the battle. Although the berserk sword heavenly soldiers had a considerable advantage in terms of military strength, their morale was far inferior. Facing the fearless attacks of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, they, who had the advantage in terms of military strength, were gradually disintegrating and becoming scattered. The majestic sword energy roared. A majestic sword light drew a brilliant halo of no less than 300 feet in radius. The entire world was filled with that kind of hissing sound of sword energy. Within 300 feet, all the crazed sword heavenly soldiers screamed and fell down in unison. Blood flowed everywhere. Bu Liuqing's figure soared to the sky, towering over the heavens. This majestic sword light brazenly appeared in the sky like a long dragon. It was mixed with endless biting cold. Absolute heaven sword. Absolute heaven sword. Absolute heaven sword. In this battle, Bu Liuqing had already used this ultimate move for the 8th time. The sweeping of the ground within 300 feet was just the warm-up. This was the prelude to this move. After the warm-up, the soaring sword energy in the sky was the real killer move. Stop him! In the enemy's camp, a loud roar suddenly sounded. A few figures soared into the sky, turning into several white lights and flashing. In the past, Bu Liuqing had never failed in his 7 attacks. He had created 7 openings for the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. Under this move, the morale of the crazed sword heavenly soldiers was greatly reduced, to the extent that they were retreating. It was no exaggeration to say that if they won this battle, Bu Liuqing's absolute heaven sword would be the greatest contribution. Now, Bu Liuqing was using the same move again. Everyone on the other side was inexplicably afraid. If there was another opening, then today's battle would be a landslide defeat. There would be no possibility of a comeback. Bu Liuqing's beard and hair fluttered. His long sword vibrated. The long sword energy dragon was also vibrating rapidly. That long dragon was already shaking its head and wagging its tail. Its scales and claws were flying. There were a total of 8 high-level saints. Each of them carried a thunderous force as they charged from 8 different directions. It was almost as if they were going to perish together with the Saint clan. The 8 of them were furious as they let out a long roar. This was not the so-called roar to gain the upper hand. It was just an attack. As they attacked the terrifying enemy in front of them, they were also attacking the ordinary soldiers of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. If they couldn't stop it, the shock force produced by this joint roar would prevent these soldiers from reacting quickly and joining the attack the moment the gap was opened. Sound wave attack. This attack was indiscriminate, and the soldiers on his side would also be affected. But it was still better than a landslide defeat. Moreover, most of the soldiers on the front lines had already been annihilated by Bu Liuqing's sword of the absolute heaven. So, the number of soldiers on his side who would die because of the sound wave attack wouldn't be too many. Bu Liuqing's thin face revealed a trace of a cold smile. It was a smile of disdain. He tightened his wrist and his body spun at high speed in the air. Suddenly, the sound of the sword energy roaring was unprecedented. At the same time, he shouted, "Kill! Kill!" Although it was only one word, Bu Liuqing poured all of his cultivation into it. It was as if a thunderbolt had exploded in the clear sky. The effect was different from the roar of the 8 enemies. The effect was more shocking and intimidating. Not to mention the ordinary soldiers below, even the 8 experts felt their minds shake when they heard this shout. Their actions that were in the process of being carried out actually had a slight pause that should not have happened. Right at this moment, the sword chi dragon that was still coiling in the air had suddenly opened its eyes. Sword energy shot out from its eyes. Boom, boom, boom. Almost at the same time, the 8 experts finally collided with the long sword energy dragon. Bu Liuqing shouted. The long sword energy dragon in the air seemed to have a life of its own. It suddenly rushed out, boom. This was a truly earth-shattering explosion. The sound of the 8 peerless experts colliding with each other was like dozens of mountains falling from the sky at the same time and then colliding with each other. For a moment, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The sky fell and the earth cracked. Countless sword lights exploded. The next moment, everyone let out a muffled groan at the same time. This kind of head-on collision, victory and defeat, there was no chance of luck. To an individual, it was a matter of life and death in an instant. Bu Liuqing's body swayed. Blood spurted out from his 7 orifices. It was obvious that his injuries were not light. He had to face 8 experts alone, and he had suffered considerable damage. However, he didn't even take half a step back. His long sword suddenly made a circle, and the originally scattered sword light once again took shape. From the gap just now, it rushed out without turning back. The sword light traversed 3,000 miles, and its power was so strong that it seemed unstoppable. It was actually better than the previous 7 times. The 8 enemies on the other side were staggering back with blood spurting out from their bodies. They were powerless to stop the magnificent sword energy. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.